Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, March 2nd meeting of the Planning Board. If I could ask the audience to please quiet their conversations, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Our first item of business is to review and approve minutes. We have minutes from June 2nd, 2022. Are there any questions or comments relative to the minutes? Mr. Jerry?
No.
Do we have a motion?
You move that we approve the minutes from the June 2nd, 2023, 22 Planning Board meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The next item of business is to sign, review and sign bills. We have bills, 4 items. The first one is for Graves Engineering for 1 to 7 Maple Avenue. Prepare for and attend Planning Board meeting, $477. Graves Engineering 42 to 44 Bowditch Drive, site plan review, $789.69. GZA Geo Environmental Incorporation for 1 Greenbrier Drive, geotechnical review, $336.83. And Gamble Associates for 1 to 7 Maple Avenue, architectural peer review for $6,525 for a total of $8,128.52. Do I have a motion?
I move that we approve and pay the bills as read by the chairman.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Our next item of business is for board member comments. Mr. Iliadi, any comments this evening?
No comments, sir.
Mr. Jerry?
I have no comments.
Mr. Thomas?
I have no comments this month, sir.
Mr. McGoldrick?
I do have a quick comment, Mr. Chairman. So the Shrewsbury Planning and Economic Development Department will be hosting 2 public meetings, one at 7 p.m. on March 13th in the Shrewsbury Senior Center, and another one on March 15th at 1 p.m. in the Shrewsbury Public Library. The meetings, which will be identical, will facilitate discussion on parking needs in Shrewsbury, specifically related to green infrastructure and sustainability topics. Members of the public are welcome to attend and make comments or ask questions. For those unable to attend, an online survey will also be made available. Additional information is available on the town website or by visiting us in the office. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGoldrick. And the only comment I have is we are down 2 board members. Mr. Iliadi is our special town meeting representative for dealing with special permits. However, we only have 3 voting members for standard projects. So if any applicant is in front, they have to understand if they want to close and have a vote, they would need a unanimous decision in order to get approval, okay? We will not be able to vote on any special permits, so any hearings that have special permit will not, we can still hear whatever additional information is available, but we will not be able to close or vote on that, okay? Just want to make that clear to everyone. With that being said, our first new public hearing is a proposed 2-family conversion special permit. Location is 7 Ira Avenue. Mr. Thomas, could please read the legal notice.
The Shrewsbury Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Thursday, March 2nd, 2023 at 7 p.m. in the Bent Presentation Room at Shrewsbury High School, 64 Holden Street, to hear the application of Steve Alvarez, 107 Harrington Farms Way, Shrewsbury, Mass. 01545, for a special permit to convert a single-family dwelling into a 2-family, as required by the Town of Shrewsbury zoning bylaw, Section 4, Table 1, Use Regulation Table, and Section 7B2, as shown on plans entitled Plan Showing Proposed Addition, in one sheet dated November 4th, 2022. Prepared by Jarvis Land Survey Incorporated, 29 Grafton Circle, Shrewsbury, Mass. 01545. Stamped by Kevin Jarvis, PLS. The subject property is located at 7 Ira Avenue and consists in whole or in part of Shrewsbury Assessor's Tax Plate 13, Plot 024000. A copy of the plans may be seen in the Department of Planning and Economic Development or on the Planning Board website.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Is the applicant present? Okay, please sit and... You could introduce yourself and tell us
Good
why
evening,
you're here.
everybody. Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Steve Alvarez. I'm the applicant. What's before you is a modest conversion of a single family to a 2-family. And what we're looking to do tonight is make sure that we meet the requirements of the special permit for the floor area ratio. I've done some calculations, and I do have some questions for you to consider. Based on gross area, we have that factor that's supposed to be at 0.3. We actually are at 0.31. However, it is my understanding that rooms that do not meet the 6-foot height in ceiling that square footage is not considered for the gross area of the in the calculation. So I put two options. One is just leave the gross area the way it is, and that's where we come up with 0.31. And option 2 is there is 2 finished half-story and a finished attic that actually have only 367 and 176 square feet, respectively, of living space. If we do the calculations, that actually becomes a 0.29 floor area ratio. So I open it to questions.
Okay, Mr. McGoldrick, just for clarification for myself, the board, and the public, I believe the .3 is of by right, and the special permit is for the additional .01. If you could just explain that a little bit, I appreciate it.
Yeah, so this is in terms of the floor area ratio. We don't have to go into that formula, but that's correct. So anything under the .3, using that formula would be by right. This calculation, as we've looked at it, exceeds that very minimally, but it does exceed that threshold, and that is triggers the requirement for the special permit we have.
Okay, thank you for that. With that being said, any questions or comments? Mr. Iliadi?
No comments, sir.
Mr. Jerry?
My question's for Mr. McGoldrick. So is it the opinion of the town then that this second calculation, excluding the areas with ceiling height under 6 feet, is incorrect?
So they provide the 2 options, and the correct calculation would be option number 1, which includes the garage and unfinished enclosed porch.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Thomas?
I have no questions, sir.
Okay, and just for the benefit of the public, you do have a ZBA approval for this, I've read as well. I don't know if you want to expand on that at all.
We went before the zoning board of appeals, and we secured all the setback relief that we required for the construction of the addition.
And the only other thing that I was talking to the town planner earlier this week, there's a question potentially with the utility hookups, where we're not going to be able to vote on this anyways. Is that something that you can definitely get clarity back to the
Yes,
town staff?
yeah,
and
I got the comments, I think it was Friday,
Yeah.
so I didn't get a chance to do
No,
all
I
of them.
understood, but you'll have a time until the next meeting. If you want to get that all cleared away, that would be great.
Sure.
Okay. With that being said, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to be heard? Not seeing any hands, I'll entertain a motion to continue this public hearing.
I would move that we continue the public hearing for the proposed 2-family conversion special permit at 7 Ira Avenue to the next meeting of the planning board on April 6th, 2023.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item of business is a new public hearing, proposed site access improvements and additional parking, site plan approval, Commonwealth of Massachusetts, DCAM, location is 295 Green Street. Mr. Thomas, if you could read the public notice.
Shrewsbury Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Thursday, March 2nd, 2023, at 7 p.m. in the Bent Presentation Room at Shrewsbury High School, 64 Holden Street, to hear the application of the United States Department of Labor, 2102 Wilson Boulevard, Suite 400, Arlington, Virginia, 22201, for site plan approval to improve site access and provide additional parking for the site, as required by the Town of Shrewsbury zoning bylaws, Section 7F3. as shown on plans entitled Parking and Access Improvements in 9 sheets dated November 2nd, 2022. Prepared by Land Planning Incorporated, 214 Worcester Street, Grafton, Mass. 01536. Sent by Norman G. Hill, P.E. Subject property is located at 295 Green Street and consists in whole or in part of Shrewsbury Assessor's Tax Plate 55, Plot 0090000. A copy of the plans may be seen in the Department of Planning and Economic Development or on the Planning Board's website.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Is the applicant present? Please introduce yourself.
Good evening, my name's Norman Hill. I'm a licensed civil engineer and land surveyor with a consulting firm of Land Planning. And with me tonight is Jeff Harrison from Vivid Design. This property is owned by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, DCAM, and the applicant is the United States Department of Labor. This is a school facility at the Grafton Job Corps. It's located southwest corner of the town where Shrewsbury touches the corner of Grafton, touches the corner of Westboro. So we had to send notices to all 3 towns. Everyone within 300 feet of this project has been notified. This project has been reviewed by your Stormwater Committee, and they have approved it. It's been reviewed by your Conservation Commission, and they have approved it. So also it's been reviewed by your consulting engineer, Jeff Walsh of Graves Engineering, and Jeff sent us a letter last week asking for a couple little changes. He asked us to add some trees along the road, which we've done. He's asked us to identify all of the abutting names and the uses, and we've done that. We submitted 2 revised plans this Tuesday. So I'd like to just walk you through this project just quickly. I know you got a busy night tonight. So the existing site is in this area. This brown thing is the existing guardhouse, which will stay. This is the existing entrance, which would stay. There's an existing gravel parking lot in this area, and they're proposing to pave it for 60 cars. And you would enter here, and the traffic coming into the site would, in the future, would come in here rather than here. It would come in. It's going to be a new gate at this point, and the guard would stop them here. They could park or go in to the Grafton Job Corps. There is a wetland out back. There's a wetland across the street. It's currently piped under this facility, and we're just going to keep that the way it is. It's relatively flat in here, comes down off the street slightly. If you look at that first picture, you can see the site in the distance. And then it drops down and back to the wetland out back. We're going to capture all of the rain. When it rains, we've got a gutter around the entire, a berm around the entire parking lot. Everything comes to 4 catch basins on site, and then it goes into the underground infiltration and detention system. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. We're hoping that you will close this meeting and approve this tonight.
Okay. I'll ask a couple. I see you've got Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3 on the plans that are in front of me. Can you explain what your plan with that?
Yes, the way this construction is proposed to happen is the first phase would include this section of the project. That would allow the people to continue to park here while the work is being done. So the infiltration system, the detention system, the catch basins, all 4 catch basins would be installed on this first phase. And then once that's complete, the second phase would start. These people would be allowed to park here now, and then this would be constructed here. That's the phasing that's proposed.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone else on the board that wishes to be heard? Mr. Eliade? Good. Mr. Jerry?
I'm all set.
No,
Mr.
sir.
Thomas? This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to be heard on this matter? Seeing no hands, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
If I may, I think there is still one remaining comment that the board may want to address from Graves Engineering regarding the landscaping to the front. Just want to call your attention to that. He does defer to the board and doesn't fully close out the comment.
Yes, Jeff Waltz said that your regulations require trees along the frontage and shrubs. And so we added the trees along the frontage, but we didn't add the shrubs. For security reasons, my client didn't want to add shrubs along the frontage.
What kind of
What kind of
security?
security reasons would that be?
I'm sorry?
What kind of security reasons would that be?
Can you speak to that?
Well, it was actually more of a maintenance issue with maintaining those shrubs as opposed to maintaining the trees.
I understand your position on that, but I don't think, just because you don't want to do it because of a maintenance thing is really a good reason for it being necessarily a security risk, so.
Well, I mentioned security. When the police drive by, they want to be able to see the site clearly if the shrubs grow up. Well,
Yeah, but I think this is part of the requirements for aesthetic reasons as well, so, I don't know. I don't think it's that big of a deal to get some shrubbery in there. What do you think?
No, I don't think it's a big deal. If Graves said that that's something that should be done, then I don't think it's something that should just be overlooked.
Mr. Chair, just to, if I may, just to clarify, so the comment is primarily that the plans as shown, they don't specify the trees that are shown to be shade trees. It does defer to the board, certainly, in terms of the landscaping and the question of the shrubs, but in terms of the 2-inch caliper and shade trees to be specified on the plans, it's primarily the Graves comment.
Okay, so we could condition this, that an updated landscape plan
and
to
my client's
include-
willing to accept the
Okay,
condition.
so if we condition that to update for the caliper trees to be identified, and I'm sorry to say, I'm in for the shrubbery as well, okay?
Okay, okay. That's fine.
Okay,
The bylaw states low shrubs, so it shouldn't be an issue.
Okay.
okay, all right.
Sorry, one final comment,
Sure.
in terms of just the fire hydrant locations. The fire department did ask for those to be, the fire department to be contacted and to revise the fire hydrant locations.
That's fine.
But again, that can be done as a condition.
Okay, I'm fine with that condition as well. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Okay, with that being said, you want to close the public hearing?
Sure. I move that we close the public hearing for the proposed site access improvements and additional parking, site plan approval, Commonwealth of Massachusetts DCAM, location 295 Green Street.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I do not believe we have a draft decision for this.
We do.
Oh, we do. I'm sorry, I went right by, oh, we're not done. Oh, yeah, we're done with comments. So
Thank
now
you.
we've got to move on to the next section of this.
Thank you. Stay well.
Okay, thank you. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Okay, so the only thing that anybody have any questions or comments relative to what's in the draft decision? It's pretty straightforward.
You just have to add.
We just have to add the
Yeah,
conditions.
just add the condition for updating the landscape plan, caliper trees and the shrubbery.
Okay. All set?
Yep.
I move that we execute or authorize the clerk to execute the decision of the planning board regarding the application for site plan approval for parking lot expansion at 295 Green Street, permit number SPA-02-2023, conditioned on the updating of the landscape plan to include the caliper of trees and shrubbery as indicated.
Do we also have to add the fire hydrant locations also into the decision?
No, that's just, they want to be notified, correct?
Okay.
Yeah, and revise, it'll be shown on the, we can do it as the as.
But it'll be part of the site plan, pre-meeting before they begin
Okay.
construction. anyway.
Just want to make sure we get it, do it once.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Our next item of business is a continued public hearing for a proposed hydrogen storage and compression system pad, site plan modification for Nels Jamesbury Incorporated. Location is 42 to 44 Bowditch Drive. Is the applicant present? Please introduce yourself.
Nice to see you guys again. My name is Paul Grady with Plug Power. We reside at 968 Albany Shaker Road up in Latham, New York.
Okay, and what has changed since the last time you were in front of us?
We have done quite a bit since the last time we were here. So we appreciate the preliminary comments from the department in the review. And immediately after leaving here last month, we were in touch with the Department of Conservation. We have applied for the NOI. We do have a hearing date scheduled for later this month with the Department of Conservation. We have gone through as well preliminary comments with them and are working actively right now with local environmental firms as well as the State Department of Environmental Protection to delineate the wetlands in the proposed location to ensure that nothing has changed since the previous surveys were done. We're also obtaining the stormwater reports from the original facility to ensure that the additional non-permeable land does not encroach too much burden on the existing overflow and stormwater system on the facility. Additionally, we've taken the preliminary comments that we received from both the fire department, the planning department, and incorporated those into the updated plans that have been submitted to the Conservation Commission as well. So we can go through one by one in your comments here, or we can, I can just open it up to you guys and we can answer anything you have open now.
Well, let me ask it this way. Mr. McGoldrick, do you have any comments that, relative to what was just brought forth for the town side? So everything seems to be, is on par with being addressed?
Correct.
Okay. I know that you have a very unique situation that both conservation, but you also have a state fire marshal review that you will need to go through.
Yeah.
So for those in the audience, this is the first time I've come across something like this, so it is a bit of an outlier. And I believe the Conservation Commission is not, doesn't have anything substantially worried about.
Not that I'm aware of. And in terms of the State Fire Marshal Office, my understanding is that this approval would be a precursor to that they won't start that process.
Yeah, that's
So it's
correct.
the
It's
chicken and
same-
egg
That's
thing.
the same understanding we've received as well from the fire marshal, is we do need, this is kind of a gate to pass before I can even start that review process with them, but we have been in touch with the state fire marshal.
Yeah. And although historically, this board typically does not go forward with site plan review until conservation is completed, where this is a special case, I think I would certainly be amenable, given the fact that conservation has indicated that there is no significant, now if there is a significant issue, obviously, you'll have to come back before us for site plan modification in any event, okay? Should this thing pass, okay? I just want to be
Yeah,
clear with that.
understood.
Okay. I think pretty much everything's been addressed for me. How about Mr. Jerry?
I have no comments. You good?
I have no more comments.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to be heard? Seeing no hands, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I move that we close the public hearing for the proposed hydrogen storage and compression system pad site plan modification, Nella's Jamesbury Incorporated, at 42-44 Bowditch Drive.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we should have a draft decision on here as well. My apologies. This is a pretty straightforward draft decision. There's nothing specifically crazy in this.
There are no
There's no waivers.
waivers,
there's,
no waiver requests?
Nope. It actually, the amount of change is really minimal in the view as far as site plan is concerned. Again, conservation may have a different take, right? So I don't have any questions relative to that.
I don't have any.
Entertain a motion.
I move that we authorize the clerk to execute the decision of the planning board regarding the application for site plan modification at 42 to 44 Bowditch Drive, permit number SPA-03-2023.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, I really appreciate it.
You know, thank you for your diligent work and getting all that done at the time that you did.
Thank you.
All right. Our next item of business is a new public meeting. This is for a parking lot and minor site alterations, request for a de minimis change. Location is Quinsigamon Plaza, 67, 87, 87 to 97 Boston Turnpike.
Good evening, for the record, Garrett Horsfall with Kelly Engineering Group. I'm also joined by Eli Katzen, representing property ownership here. This project was, and Plaza was last before the board in about 2017, where we permitted a parking expansion, which referred to as Dewey Road parking expansion. That has since been completed. And also as a part of that approval was a proposal for an expanded 52 parking lot increase, which actually goes on to the Shrewsbury Housing Authority lot located at the northwestern portion of the site. Just so you're familiarity, there's the Trader Joe's building here, the Total Wine building, and then there's several retail tenants along with this building, Chipotle, the Lakeside Grill, Supercuts, etc. And so since then, the property has gone some minor changes. They've acquired the former Midas building and converted it to a Verizon store. For reference, this parcel of land and associated building coverage, parking spaces are now included into the zoning legend as a contiguous parcel in common ownership for zoning purposes. So then there were also various edits that occurred. FedEx reduced size and space. There's a future gym, which has now been demised as well, and associated minor site changes with handicapped parking and spaces. That was all reviewed and approved administratively at the town planner level. We also relocated dumpsters over here, which were not really formally corralled. So now they're in a better position, and they'll have fencing, screening appropriately, which we've all been coordinating again with the planning department and building department. We did stripe out a couple spaces. As I'm sure the board is familiar with this site, parking is very tight, and that's the main reason why we're here tonight as well. And so there were 7 spaces that have been historically considered in the count as well, but since that there's the half sizes because of dumpsters, those have now been eliminated from the count as well. And Gerardo's Bakery has a storage shed, which took up a couple spaces as well, so we did remove that from the count as well. And then there was an undeveloped piece of land, which the applicant did coordinate with the town to build 5 additional spaces. Every space is counted on this site. So currently on the site, there's 392 spaces. There's 390 required by zoning. We would request that all of these would be considered de minimis changes. And the second part of our request tonight, again, would be, again, back to the previous housing authority lot. We have gotten revised approval from the housing authority to have a reduced parking lot configuration permitted back here. For reference, the red is the previous limit of work, and the blue would be the new limit of work associated with that parking field. There's about 6,600 square feet less of pavement and about 10,800 square feet less of disturbance. Essentially, when the housing authority saw the limits of this work, they weren't happy with how close it was getting and the trees being taken down. So there's 29 spaces associated with this. There's 5 spaces lost for access to this. So it's an increase of 24 spaces to the plaza lodge, the total, bringing that total up to 416. So there would be 23 less spaces than previously proposed here. There was 52 previously proposed in this area. We have graded this site out at very similar matter that was previously approved, and the stormwater system would just be reduced size, which we would request that we would just review that at the town engineer level. This all previously did go through Graves Engineering and was reviewed and approved as a part of that request. And so we would request that this be considered de minimis change, but look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Very good, thank you. Is the intention to have that primarily used for employee parking? Because that site is, as you know, it's difficult.
Eli,
Absolutely what we would hope.
I mean, you would encourage.
A little bit on the tenants, but
Right.
absolutely, that's what we would suggest to them.
That would be awesome. Okay, any questions or comments from the board? Mr. Iliadi,
No questions, sir.
Mr. Jerry,
I have none.
Mr. Thomas?
Are you planning on doing that extra additional parking? Because I remember that, I remember you coming in front of the board back in 17 for that, and nothing's happened, so.
Yeah, so the plan is to do that this spring.
Okay.
We'd love to get started as soon as we can, and ease any parking scenarios that are on site. What happened is Total Wine Total Wine waited to finance it, and now COVID hit, and now they realize, oh, we really do need the parking. So here we are again.
Well, this was part of an already previously approved, and we've already gone through much of the technical elements of this, so in my
Yeah.
view, I believe this is a de minimis
Yes.
change. Does anyone else disagree with that?
I do not.
I do not, so we'll entertain a motion.
I move that we grant the request for de minimis change for the parking lot and minor site alterations at Quinsigamond Plaza, 67, 87, and 87 to 97 Boston Turnpike.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Our next item of business is a continued public hearing for 1 Greenbrier Drive, over 55 housing development, site plan approval and special permit, Cypress Avenue Development LLC. Location is 1 Greenbrier Drive and 169R Gulf Street. We do have a request for continuance on this. Do I have any questions or comments relative to that request for
No.
continuance? Okay. Just so the public understands, we're gonna throw a date out there for this continuance, and it's a special one, only for the simple reason that this project has been in front of us for quite some time now, and the reason why we're not able to vote on it is because we don't have a quorum because of its special permit. And we're going to have a remote meeting on the 16th of March, specifically and only for 1 Greenbrier Drive. There will be no other hearings or meetings continued to that point, okay? You will obviously will have the ability to log in and view that if you so choose, but if we request to continue, it will be to the March 16th.
I move that we continue the public hearing for the site plan approval and special permit for 1 Greenbrier Drive, over 55 housing development, Cypress Avenue Development at 1 Greenbrier Drive and 169R Gulf Street to the March 16th meeting of the planning board.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Our next item of business is a proposed warehouse and distribution facility, site plan approval, Shrewsbury Land Property Owner LLC, continued public hearing, 440 Hartford Turnpike. We also have a request for continuance on this project as well. I do know that they're still working on the slope walls and so forth, correct?
Correct.
So I think they're waiting for some feedback on that. Does anybody have any other questions or comments relative to that continuance? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we continue the public hearing for the proposed warehouse and distribution facility site plan approval for 440 Hartford Turnpike to the April 6th meeting of the planning board.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Our next item of business is a continued public hearing for a proposed automobile dealership, site plan approval, Bach Shrewsbury Worcester LLC. It's a continued public hearing. Its location is 701 Boston Turnpike. Mr. Ricker, please introduce yourself.
Good
I know
evening,
you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, I know you know me, but my name is Richard Ricker, and I'm an attorney here representing the applicant. And with me is Mike Clemmy from Subaru of New England. The Bach Group, also Patrick Healy from Thompson Liston, and Maureen McHugh from McMahon Associates, which is the traffic engineer that we used for this project. Since the last time we've been here, we have had back and forth comments, and I believe we've pretty much addressed everything that was put to us in terms of the peer reviews and the additional peer reviews that came after that. As you know, we've been here a number of times. We have addressed, as I say, most everything. I don't think there's anything hanging out there. Is there, Chris? I think we're asking you for approval.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Ricker. Any questions or comments from the board? Mr. Jerry?
I have none.
I have none.
I have none either. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to be heard on this matter?
The field school thing.
Seeing no hands, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I move that we close the public hearing for the proposed automobile dealership site plan approval, Bach Shrewsbury Worcester LLC, located at 701 Boston Turnpike.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Do So we have a draft decision in front of us.
Which is good.
It is pretty straightforward. I can't
did it this
recall,
afternoon.
there's no waivers required, requested for this either, correct?
No, there's
Okay. So, because we've had many a conversation, I'm not looking for conversation here, Rich. I'm just looking
Right.
at you because you're right there. So. it's
There
a
is one
pretty-
waiver request.
There is. I'm sorry. Could you tell me what that waiver is?
On the setback of the trees.
Good evening, Patrick Healy from Thompson Liston. We had requested a waiver of the perimeter landscaping planting at the property line where we're not clearing to the property line, and we had discussed that with the board previously.
I believe I remember that now.
Right.
I don't see that in the
It's in there.
decision. Did I
No,
overlook
it's
it?
not in the decision.
Oh, here it is, yes. So we do have
it's in there.
a waiver for
Oh, yeah.
section 7D, 3D, along property lines that should be provided a landscape strip.
You're right.
Um,
I read it too.
We have a recommendation to approve that waiver. I don't have any issue with that waiver. Does anybody else have any issues with that waiver? Okay. So other than that, the standard decision is pretty straightforward. There are a couple items that I just want to make sure that everybody in the public is aware. So there are 17, there's many more, there's more than 17, but there's 17 conditions specific to the site plan. I'm not going to read every one of them, but I'm going to read a couple that I think are important of note. So the entrance and exit on South Street shall be physically restricted to a right-in, right-out only design as shown on plan set site plan of the proposed automobile dealership in 28 sheets, prepared by, doesn't have a name, but prepared by, okay, it's double, okay. My apologies, I'm skipping lines here. Prepared and dated August 22nd, 2022, revised October 22, 2022, January 25, 2023, and February 24, 2023, prepared by Thompson Liston Associates, P.O. Box 570, Boylston, Mass. 01505, stamped by Jerry Holdwright, PLS, and Patrick Healy, P.E. Another condition is any egress from the site from South Street shall be designated as a no truck traffic during the hours of 7 to 9 a.m. and 4 to 6 p.m., and no vehicular test drives. Final design of South Street exit shall include signage prohibiting such traffic. Next one is there shall be no outdoor speakers to be used for announcements, ambient music, or advertisements. And the other that's of note is the board acknowledges that this project requires to go through the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act Office, or MEPA, process, and requires that any changes and any MEPA approvals shall be forwarded to the planning board and may be subject to site plan modification or de minimis change. Okay? Is there any questions or comments relative to the remainder of the decision? Okay, I'll take a motion.
We need to vote on the waiver separately.
Yes.
No, I think
I believe it can be inclusive.
it can be inclusive, you can just include the waiver request.
I'll move that we authorize the clerk to execute the decision of the planning board regarding the application for site plan approval at 701 Boston Turnpike for Bach Shrewsbury Worcester LLC, permit number SPA-04-2022, inclusive of the waiver requested for landscaping.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, absolutely. Okay, so that's closed. Okay, our next item of business is a continued public hearing for 1 to 7 Maple Avenue, Beal Commons, site plan approval and special permit, Shrewsbury Haskell MM LLC. Location is 1 to 7 Maple Avenue. Please introduce yourselves as we get set up here. How you doing? would it be better if maybe, do you hear when they talk from the microphone here, or are you just hearing ambient noise?
I think the mic is
Yeah, I
fixed
think
here.
that's just for audio, for the video portion here, so I think maybe if you just raise your voice, that would be great. Thank you.
I think you fixed the mic.
Understood.
All right. May I begin?
Yes, please.
Can everyone hear me in the audience? So again, my name is Taylor Bearden, partner at Civico Development. We're here on a continued public hearing relative to the proposal for Beal Commons at 1 through 7 Maple Avenue. Since you all have the slide deck in front of you, I'll just verbalize when I'm changing slides behind you. Next slide, please. So with your permission, my intention here this evening is to go through a number of items and primarily just to recap where we've been relative to the last meeting with the select board, to give an overview of the revised plan that was presented to the select board but has not yet been presented to the planning board, and then to talk through parking and traffic relative to our perspective on density and walkability, and then to give brief updates on the status of the transportation and architectural peer reviews before outlining next steps. Next slide. So what we have done here is we've created a new plan that is reflective of the comments we've received to date, as well as the discussions that we've had both at this board but also most recently with the select board and the feedback we had heard from them, all through the lens of focusing on walkability and then the design of public open space. We have addressed the architectural peer review comments. The peer review itself was largely supportive, but those items that we did incorporate will be represented in future plan submissions, and I'll go through those specifically at the end of this presentation. The same is true for traffic and parking. We had a conversation with MDM and our traffic consultant before this meeting, and we were able to talk through a number of those items. They're not entirely resolved, but we have limited the number of outstanding questions, and now we are amending our parking analysis and traffic analysis based on the proposed changes in the plan. Once that analysis has been updated to reflect what we're presenting here, then we will finalize a written response to MDM's comments for the traffic peer review. Next slide. So in summary, I want to bring up 4 points that we addressed that have specifically been changed based on the plan changes. The first piece is we've reduced the commercial area by about 9%, bringing down that 7,700 square foot figure to about 7,000 square feet. We have been responsive to the comments about building mass by shrinking the Haskell Street wing of the building by about 40 feet, which brings down the overall building mass by about 6%. And we've reduced impervious surfaces, which includes both pavement and building footprint, by about 4%, which has enabled us to increase open green space that's usable to members of the public and residents by about 6%. Next slide. So the plan here is just the baseline. The format of this presentation, I will largely be going through before and after images so that the board and the public can see the changes specifically on the plan. So before I do that, I just wanted to reference the baseline plan to which we will be referring in this presentation, which is what was presented at the last meeting and shown on screen. Next slide. So this next image you see is the March 2023 update. This is reflective of the commercial square footage changes that I just spoke about, and a number of increases in usable open space, a community garden that we have placed in the area adjacent to the Haskell Street wing, as well as a pocket park at the Maple and Main intersection. And we've retained the same number of parking spaces, although we have reconfigured the parking lot. Next slide. So to provide a visual of exactly what we've done by cutting off the end of the Haskell Street wing of the building, The image on top shows a plan view of where the former building footprint was, and instead shows what we are proposing as a community garden for tenants. Now, I do want to call out one thing here, is in that location, there's a dotted line over the top of that which represents where we are proposing what I'm referring to as land banking public parking. So in the event, and at the board's request, of course, if we were to come back if we were to come back in a year or some other period of time requested by the board, then we would be able to evaluate parking and traffic impacts relative to what we are projecting. And we have the option here of taking that land banked green space and turning that into 12 additional parking spaces.
I'm sorry, is there someone who could shut the door?
We can't shut the door.
Can't shut the door.
That's not a microphone.
You could open that door instead, though.
Auditorium as far as I know.
I'll speak up.
Sure. Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's really hard to hear over the shouting.
Okay. All right. So the image on screen, the bottom image, shows a front view of what the former building mass looked like relative to the proposed reduction in the length of the building. And you can see the imagery at the bottom shows the equivalent of the plan view on top. So we're contemplating the inclusion of garden boxes and additional landscaping in that area. And again, this is the same location where we would have potential future land banked parking. A number of things we changed in the plan to enable this included the elimination of the tuck under parking on the back of the building that previously had been residential only, and that means that we were able to relocate residential space to the back of the building at the garden level. Next page. So again, we'll go through a series of before and after to call out specifically what we have changed. The image on the left shows previously what were private patios for the residential units that effectively were treated as townhouse entries, even though they're not technically townhouse units. Those formerly private patios, based on the comments of the architectural peer review, we have changed the plan to reflect pedestrian access from the sidewalk to the entry of those units, which creates a little more permeability in the plan from the public realm and adds to the kind of pedestrian experience on Haskell Street. Next slide. So as I summarized, now looking at the back side of the Haskell Street wing, where we formerly had tuck under parking and a drive aisle, we have been able to change that drive aisle by eliminating the tuck under parking and thus returning that to kind of patio and green space that is sort of semi-private, which will improve the pedestrian circulation of the site for those who may be traveling from the parking area to the commercial space, or potentially traveling from the Maple and Main intersection through the back of the site toward any future green space that may be on the retained parcel. Next slide. Now we're looking at the call-out area for the Maple and Main intersection, where formerly on the left side we had a no pedestrian connectivity between that and the back part of the development. Now we've created a pocket park that enables pedestrians who may be walking from that part of the town center through to the back of the development, and created a little seating area, increased the green space and made it more usable for members of the public. We've also reconfigured the loading area, which is that section where my cursor is, right at the top, or right at the bottom of that, the parking stub at the top of the building. And so another thing I'll call out here, actually I'll do that on the next slide. Next slide, please. So the call-outs here are related to the change in accessible parking spaces. We have consolidated the accessible spaces so they are more proximate to the commercial units. And we've also added based on feedback from town staff, we have added an electric vehicle charging station that is also an accessible space. We've also consolidated the trash enclosure area because that was made necessary by the reconfiguration of the Haskell Street wing. Next. So what I'm showing here on the left is the previous proposed area along the Chase Terrace side of the project, where there was a limited landscape buffer and we had contemplated the removal of existing trees. Now, in the image on the right, you can see those darker green circles, of which there are 3. Those represent existing trees that, by reconfiguring the parking area, we are able to retain those trees, which was feedback we heard at several meetings previously. And also we have increased the landscape buffer between Chase Terrace neighbors and this project. So you can see we've been able to do so by creating 23 compact parking spaces. Those 22 spaces are on the Haskell Street edge, and then there is a single compact parking space made necessary by that island there where there's where my cursor is, where there's a 1. So the total number of compact parking spaces that we would propose in this development are 23. And what this accomplishes is it allows us to be responsive to the goal of increasing the landscape buffer between the Chase Terrace neighbors and the parking area, while also retaining the existing mature trees. Next slide. So this area here specifically calls out the in the garden space that we're contemplating based on the shortened building. I realize I already had described this to you, so I'll move on here. But the intention here is to create a friendlier buffer between Haskell Street and the parking lot, so that there's more green space to buffer the parking area from the public way. Next slide. Now we're looking at the outermost corner of the building at the intersection of Haskell Street. And this was also in response to feedback from the architectural peer review. We have decreased the square footage of the patio, which increases our green space, and made that whole area a little more permeable for pedestrians who are passing through. And this also allows us, and this was where the feedback was relevant from the architectural peer review, it allows us to manage the grade changes a little bit better there. But again, most importantly, provides an additional green space element buffering the building and the pedestrian experience from traffic. Next slide, please. So in summary here, as I had mentioned at the beginning, we were very focused on the creation of more pedestrian-friendly green spaces on the site. So what this slide does is it shows you how the 3 spaces that we have proposed here kind of link the rest of the town common with the future retained parcel and provide more of a pedestrian-friendly experience as pedestrians may kind of circulate around the site on the outside, going down from Main and Maple to Haskell Street. This provides a little bit more of a kind of friendly and softer experience for anyone who may be traveling between or across this site and other amenities in the town center. Next slide. So I'd like to discuss public parking now, and I'll explain the benefits that we see about shared parking. So we did not change the number of parking spaces as we have proposed previously. You may notice that we're referring to 146 spaces as a single number versus delineating between the 20 public parking spaces and then the balance being for the development. This was based on feedback we had received, because the ultimate number of parking spaces that we are providing will be made available for residents, members of the public, but also patrons of the businesses. And you can't truly differentiate between a member of the public and a patron of a commercial space who may be choosing to park here and patronize a business on site while also walking to another amenity in the town center. We had explained that we would come to this next meeting with a better explanation for how we were proposing to manage the shared parking. And based on feedback with our property manager, Madison Management, we've concluded that the way we would like to approach this in the first year is to provide residents and commercial staff parking stickers so that those stickers can easily signal to the manager of the building who is parking where and for how long. We would grant one sticker per leaseholding resident, and the management company would monitor the lot after lease up to determine and provide feedback on the need for additional controls if we were to come back to the board at a later date, at the same time where we would discuss the need for potentially reallocating that green space to parking. I do want to call out that because we have changed the commercial mix, although we didn't change the residential mix, we have reduced the peak demand that our traffic engineer is projecting to 122 spaces. Previously, the peak demand had been 127, so there's been a reduction there. And that maintains under all peak scenarios 20 public parking spaces that are open and retained for public non-affiliated uses. Next slide, please. So the table here, the purpose of showing this table is to show the difference between projected parking uses between the original building footprint and then the proposed reduction in the building footprint. So each of these three boxes show the weekday morning, weekday evening, and Saturday midday peak demand. And then within each of those boxes on the left column represents our original building footprint. In the rightmost column, it was the reduced building footprint. So if you look at the total on the bottom, you'll see that in each scenario, weekday AM, weekday PM, and Saturday midday, there's been a reduction in our projected parking needs based on that 700 square foot reduction in commercial space. The row on the bottom that says surplus for public use, this is the most important figure here, which shows you the number of parking spaces that are not projected to be used by any of the uses on site in either of the three scenarios, weekday morning, weekday evening, and Saturday midday, ranging between at a low of 24 available parking spaces and a high of 62 available parking spaces for uses that are not generated on site. Next slide. I'd like to talk a little bit about the flip side of the parking and traffic discussion, which is density and walkability, because parking and traffic are, of course, just one component about overall circulation and use on a site. Next slide, please. So we have done a very brief review of some nearby properties. This is the table on the left of your screen. And this represents in density units per acre what some existing town center mixed use buildings are in terms of dwelling units per acre in the town center. So you'll see in that farthest right column, that's the units per acre figure. They correlate to the addresses represented on the left. All of these are in the immediate adjacent area to Beal Commons. And that bottom row, 1 through 7 Maple Ave, represents what the density of this site is as proposed, which would be 21 units per acre. So as you can see, it's relatively in line and contextual with the other precedent developments that are already in the area. I'd like to call out a couple of items relative to the master plan and how the master plan has encouraged concentration of mixed-use development in key locations like the town center. So it's a smart growth principle to guide development into areas with existing infrastructure. And in addition, the master plan has identified the encouragement of infill in existing commercial areas already as more efficient than creating density in areas that doesn't already have existing infrastructure, both from a utility perspective, but also because you will generate relatively less traffic impact in an already developed area. But in summary, that all those factors contribute to creating a town center that is pedestrian friendly and a shopping and service area and a neighborhood gathering place. That last line came from the master plan. And how we address those points in the master plan is to promote walkable development, which will in turn reduce vehicle trips, whereas the contrary point being that if we were to create a more car-oriented development, we're going to generate more traffic. So by focusing on the pedestrian safety and the walkability and the circulation of this site, what we are trying to do is we're trying to promote a development that is in line with both the zoning ordinance and the town center district, but also the master plan and the goals for creating a vibrant town center that will promote walkability and therefore decrease vehicle trips, as opposed to encourage vehicle trips through the creation of significantly more vehicle-focused infrastructure. Next slide, please. So I'm now going to go through just a couple of comparisons to give a sense of the relative density of and how to visualize Shrewsbury's town center relative to some other well-known town centers in Massachusetts. So for the benefit of the public who may not understand Florida area ratio, that basically represents the development intensity on a site. So if you have a Florida area ratio of 1, it means that the built square footage on a site is 1-to-1 equivalent to the land area. So what this is showing us here is in the town center zoning district, the FAR is approximately 0.28. That means it's about a third. So there's going to be about a third of built square footage relative to the amount of land area. That number increases to 0.3 from 0.28 with the inclusion of Beal Commons as proposed. Now, if we go to the next slide, I will show you what Concord Central Business District looks like, because it's relatively comparable from an FAR perspective at 0.32. You'll see the image on the right is an aerial view that shows, consistent with Shrewsbury's Town Center zoning district guidelines, buildings that are close to the street with parking tucked away in the back and density concentrated in this corridor. If you'll move to the next slide, please. I'll go to another well-known town center in this area, which is Hudson Central Business District, where the floor to area ratio in that neighborhood is approximately 3 times, well, not quite 3 times, 2.5 times more.
Excuse me, could you keep the comments quiet? It's hard enough to hear. If everybody could just please not have side conversations, it would be helpful. Thank you.
Can you all hear me?
No, we don't see the slides, we can't hear you.
Okay, well, I'll speak up again. Okay. So Hudson Central Business District is about 0.76 for an FAR, and again, that image on the left just shows you the buildings that are tight to the street and parking tucked away behind the pedestrian way. And I share these again because the intent of the zoning district, as it's written, creates the precedent conditions for these types of environments, which is why we are proposing the project as we have. I'll give you one more example here. This is Amherst in western Massachusetts with a slightly higher density of 0.82 for their central business district. Now, if you'll move one more slide, I want to talk quickly about the existing population within a comfortable 10-minute walk radius, which represents about a half mile. And because I'd like to talk more broadly about how Beal Commons is going to contribute to the overall walkability of the district, and by creating a destination location that is tying into other town center amenities and setting the conditions for a friendly and safe pedestrian environment. Not only are we creating an opportunity for the residents of the building and the immediate adjacency, but we're also increasing the opportunity for those who are within a comfortable walking distance of the site. So there's approximately 1,365 residents within that half-mile walk of the Beal Commons site. These are potential customers for all town center shops and services, not just Beal Commons. And the more that we can set a precedent and contribute to the pedestrian friendliness and vitality, creating a safe environment, the more that all businesses will benefit from that walkshed area. Next slide. So I just want to compare quickly to a number of car-centric planning practices. Here, the image on the left is actually Framingham. That's 5 lanes of traffic in one direction. And what I'm showing here is what we create when we focus heavily on vehicle uses as opposed to pedestrian uses. The image on the right could be in many places in the USA, but what you see is expansive parking in front of the building where a building does not meet the street, very wide roads that prioritize through traffic and not visitation, and they encourage high speeds, which in turn creates an environment that is not safe for the pedestrians, which discourages walking and further discourages an overall vitality of a district. What we are trying to do here is create an environment where those in the immediate adjacency are comfortable and encouraged to participate in the public realm as residents and individuals, and where they are not marginalized by vehicle infrastructure. Next slide. So I'm going to cover two slides, one with the frontage on Maple and Main and the other frontage on Haskell, showing exactly how those zoning district guidelines and those principles of good town center design create a more inviting environment for pedestrians, passerbys, and anyone in this area. The image on the left obviously is the existing condition, and you can see the building is set back significantly from the street, and as compared to the image on the right in the before and after, which shows a much more active, diverse mix of uses on the ground floor with much more street level activation and friendly green spaces as you round the building. Next slide. To Haskell Street, where the form of the building obviously changes because the character of the neighborhood changes to be more residential. In the previous use, there's a large amount of asphalt and a lack of clarity in the curb cuts relative to how vehicles may be entering and exiting, which is discouraging for pedestrians because it's unsafe. You don't know exactly when a vehicle may be turning, where instead what we're doing is defining the street edge, increasing the landscaping, making it much more friendly. And again, as I had shown you in that image where we create a number of pedestrian moments around the building, just generally encouraging the free circulation of people between other town center amenities and the retained parcel in the back. Next slide. So now what I will do is just quickly run through what we see as the outstanding questions relative to the traffic peer review update. As I had said at the beginning, we are preparing formal responses. Our analysis is going to change slightly because of the changes in our proposed plan, so we didn't want to bring those written responses yet until you had had an opportunity to review the updated plans and given us some feedback, at which point we will change our analysis to reflect the decisions we make. I do want to call out two items relative to Mass DOT that are still outstanding. We have discussed with MDM that we need to seek permission from Mass DOT, who has jurisdiction on the Maple frontage, for a do not block the box at Haskell and Maple. We'll also discussing with Mass DOT traffic signal coordination adjustments. The latter two bullet points relate to a discussion that's ongoing with MDM. We will prepare responses where we need to determine the extent of potential impacts on Wesleyan Street and discuss potential mitigation strategies for Wesleyan Street. And overall, our goal is to reach consensus with MDM on the impacts and their recommendations by the next meeting. So I want to make one note before I move on to the next slide, which is just perhaps a helpful comment relative to the way that we have been talking about parking and traffic, which is that the traffic at the former Beal School was significantly higher than what is projected for the proposed use for Beal Commons. And so the existing conditions are not necessarily reflective of the most enduring historical use for the building. I just want to call that out because I feel like that's an important variable that, because of the period of time between the closure of the school and now, the existing conditions have changed. Next slide, please. So as I had shared, the architectural peer review was quite favorable. However, there was some actionable feedback that we are taking into account or have already done so. These 5 points were recommendations made by the peer reviewer. These will be either reflected in plans that you will see at the next submission, or we are in agreement and we'll just reflect those changes. Next slide. So just to make my final points here, the things that I was hoping to have shared with you all today is that the level of density in Shrewsbury's town center is, that we're proposing for Beal Commons is not dissimilar to the existing infrastructure in the immediate town center area, and it's also relatively low compared to other thriving town centers in Massachusetts. Our analysis indicates that the level of traffic generation is unlikely to exceed the former Beal School, and we've also obviously, in response to comments from this board, we have reduced our commercial square footage further to further reduce parking and traffic impacts. But in the context of all of this, we have been reviewing in the context of walkability as that other essential component to mobility and circulation. And how can we amend and modify the plan such that we create a safe environment for everyone to travel to and from other amenities that may be part of the town center in the future. As by way of next steps, from my perspective, we intend to finalize plan updates based on your feedback this evening, and finalize the peer review responses with MDM, as well as have probably a subsequent meeting with them, and then hopefully review special permit and site plan criteria with this board at a meeting date soon in the future. So with that, back to the board. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Did you say something?
I said thank you.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Niso, I see that you are sitting here. Would you like to give us a quick overview of any new information that you may have uncovered since our last meeting?
Sure. Again, for the record, Robert Michaud, principal with MDM Transportation Consultants. So we've, as the applicant has indicated, had a meeting to discuss certain aspects of the revised plan, and a number of the comments that we raised in our January 19th memo. I think the applicant certainly headed in the right direction. You know, you've heard things like parking banking, so they're attempting to make a responsible approach to providing enough flexibility in the program that if subject to monitoring, it's determined that more parking is actually needed based on actual tenancy of the facility, that there's enough flexibility to offer that. So we think that those types of elements are exactly what we would call good planning, and would give the town some latitude in making sure that if issues like parking become an issue, that there's a means to address it. As it relates to Mass DOT, you heard a few comments that relate to their ongoing efforts to coordinate with Mass DOT. We don't think those are heavy lifts. We don't see that in the example of a do not block the box marking and control, that would be an untenable issue for DOT. We think it's relatively easy and straightforward to not only discuss but to implement. Signal coordination is another matter. There's another set of analysis that we've asked the applicant to provide to demonstrate whether or not that type of coordination would actually make sense. We know that it's feasible. The system at the signals, the two downtown signals, were designed to operate in coordination. They currently are not. No one seems to really know why. They're working independently from one another. The applicant has shared some initial thoughts and some initial outcomes of analysis that would suggest that there may be some benefit to coordinating, but also some impacts, right? So there might likely be some trade-offs that need to be considered. So we haven't had any formal submittal to us to review that, but we think that the applicant is being responsible in terms of pursuing additional analysis to flesh out whether or not that makes sense. As it relates to Wesleyan and the potential impacts to local roads, they again are considering additional potential mitigation measures should post-occupancy indicate that there's a notable increase in volume on local streets, more so than they're predicting. And those types of controls or mitigation actions really could comprise a number of different things, everything from a speed feedback sign to pavement striping, wayfinding signs, things of that nature that we're in discussions with the applicant about right now. So The summary is that I think they're absolutely headed in the right direction. I think they're offering flexible elements of design that will allow the town to be to seek appropriate solutions should they arise, particularly parking. And the other issues I think are they're making headway on. But I until I see things in writing, till those evolve to a higher level, I'm not in a position to offer definitive opinion. But I do think that the applicant's making a concerted effort to address each of our comments. So,
Thank you.
thanks.
Just so that we're clear, this is not site, these are not plans, okay? These are drawings, so we've not received any plans relative to what changes have been brought forth. And also, this is the first time we've got them is today, okay? Now, I know you may have presented at other boards, but we may not be present at those boards, so this is the first time for us. So for the public's understanding, this is new for us too, so we need time to absorb. So be mindful of that as we go through and we have questions that come out from the board before I open up for public comment, okay? So you are working on physical plans though, correct?
We are working on physical plans, but in part, we're hoping to hear some feedback to see if the direction that we're going is reflective of the comment that you had previously made.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll start. My voice is nice and warmed up at the moment. I'm happy that you reduced the length of the building. I know that was a comment that I had brought up at the last meeting, and I like the addition of allowing the access, pedestrian access around the site, so you don't have to go around the whole block to get through there. I like the planning of the additional, that parking, the banking of the parking should it be needed. I am a bit disappointed that the retail end was reduced in order for this to happen. I would have rather have seen a unit reduction as a part of this as well. I know, excuse me, please, I appreciate all the support out there, but I really don't, I'm not looking for, when anybody else is talking, please let one person talk at a time, okay? So I know that there's a financial viability element that's a part of this, and again, financial viability is definitely on the applicant side. It's not on this board's side to determine what is financially viable. My biggest concern with the number of units is, even though the trip generation may be similar or less than what was previously known there when Beal was in operation, the type of use is changed dramatically, right? So you've got residents living there, not the standard start and stop of school day and things of that nature. So although the trip generation numbers may show a favorable thing, I think what needs to be kind of balanced against is what those trip generations are from. Okay, so I personally would like to see the building stay the same, but maybe if we can do something on reducing the units, that would put less pressure on the parking situation. It certainly would help offset some of the pressure of the downtown area and subsequent in the neighboring streets. That's all I'm going to say for now. I'll open it up for comments from the board. Mr. Jerry?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said a lot of the things that I was going to say. I mean, the prior 4 meetings, I think this board's been relatively clear that we'd like to see fewer units, and we're still looking at 55, so I'm a little surprised that you didn't even try 54. But, so I agree with that. I think lowering the amount of commercial space instead of the units, that's the opposite, I think, of what we would have liked to see. I will commend you. I think the overflow parking idea is nice. I like that you put that in there, but, you know, we still don't have, I think, sufficient parking for the use that you've laid out here. And you've shrunk 23 of the spaces to be compact spaces, so now some number of people coming to the site would not be able to use those, which creates a potential issue too. So I still don't, I'm kind of hung up on the parking management plan myself too, because I'm not sure how you're going to distinguish between a resident of a unit and the public. And I appreciate that you're gonna give stickers to the resident of the unit, but if I have 3 cars and you give me 1 sticker, how do you know that my other 2 cars are not public coming to use the site? So I still think you have an issue here in terms of the parking. And I did have a question for you on the supply and demand page you have here. I just found it interesting that on the retail line, on the original building footprint, you had 4 spaces, and that actually increased with the smaller footprint. So I was just confused why, with 700 square feet less of commercial space, you actually had an increase in that line item while every other one went down.
Are you talking about Saturday midday?
Yes.
Okay. So what I think is likely is that when the overall retail space, sorry, overall commercial, not to confuse the term retail, when the overall commercial space shrunk, we had to reallocate the test fit a little bit.
Okay.
And so because what we're trying to do here is represent a best guess about each of these spaces.
So it's how you allocated the space between the uses.
Yeah, so because we're literally laying out a potential test fit, we're not just doing the math. And so the architect is putting forth it's very conceptual, but a proposal. And so when we look at that, it wasn't necessarily as simple as just proportionally reducing each of the uses.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Thomas?
So I agree with both of the other board members' comments. You always talk about walkability. Well, I think the walkability, the retail is what drives the walkability of the town center. And you have reduced the amount of square footage in the retail. So to me, it doesn't promote walkability by having less retail square feet. I think people want to walk to a coffee shop or a brewery or whatever the case may be. They're not necessarily going to walk to their friend's house because their friend doesn't live in the center of town. So I think by reducing the square footage of the commercial, it reduces the walkability nature. And like Mr. Jerry also said, we've been very, very clear about what we all feel about the unit count is the problem with the traffic and the parking on the site, and you didn't even reduce it by 1. So that's very concerning for me why that didn't happen at all after we, for 3 or 4 meetings, have all said that that's what we think needs to happen. So that is also a concern of mine. So not to keep beating a dead horse, but that's what we all have said and felt and really haven't seen. And the building smaller Hassel Street, that's great. The more park area, that's great for parking later. I'm not saying what you've done isn't good, but the number one thing that we have said has not been addressed. That's all I have to say for now.
Okay. Any other comments from the board? Mr. Eliade?
I echo the other members' remarks. I was surprised at the FAR that you came up with from 0.28 goes up only by 0.02 of a point to 0.30, which is great, but I really think to make this project go, it would need to you would need to increase the commercial and decrease the residential. Okay.
That's all I have for now.
Right. So this is a public hearing. I am going to open up to the public comment, and I'm going to ask a favor. For starters, let's not talk about the things we've already talked about. We're very, very, very familiar with the concerns relative to traffic. We're very relative to a lot of things with the site. We're looking for new items for us to have in consideration, okay? All right. With that being said, is there anyone in the public? Yes. Now, there are microphones down front, so if you could please come down and hopefully you're able to, and introduce yourself, your name and address, and bring your question.
Jason Molina, 31 Worcester Avenue. Is this on?
Yeah, I'm having trouble hearing you, to be honest with you.
Jason Molina, 31 Worcester Avenue. Okay, so I appreciate the comments, appreciate the work that's been done to make changes so far. I'm going to echo what I've said in the first meeting, and I'm bringing it up again because it hasn't been addressed to date so far. It's in 3 specific categories. So one is about the design. So if we talk about design, we talk about, what the planning board would be focusing on is going back to lining up to what is specified in the town center zoning from terms of building design standards and guidelines. So the first point is 5E1, which is building form, and I'm going to read it verbatim. Point 1, multi-story buildings shall clearly articulate the base, middle, where applicable, and top of the building using cornices, borders of a distinct material, or articulating features on every visible surface of the building. So I know that from the Maple Avenue's perspective that there is articulation. There's different materials shown. You can even see on the screen there. But on the Haskell Street side, the back side, the side also with the parking, that still has not been addressed, or at least has not been a comment brought up at the select board meeting nor tonight. So I think that's still an open item for the planning board to consider, because it is specified in our town zoning document. Also to that town zoning document is section 5H1 relative to dormers. I'll read it verbatim. That's that piece. It says, on pitched roof lines, dormers shall be used to break up roof surfaces and shall be provided at a minimum frequency of 1 per 30 horizontal feet of or fraction thereof. So we still do not see dormers reflected in the rendering on screen. Okay, and then supporting to that, to those 2 points, is section 5J1 relative to building materials, saying materials and building treatments shall be used that reduce the visibility of buildings from distant vantage points and shall be consistent and compatible with traditional New England design construction. Okay, so that's 3 distinct points that town meeting members had voted on, and the planning board is obligated, I believe, to refer to that unless there's a overriding special permit request. Of course, there's 3 things that were requested, but not the design was not listed as those exceptions. Okay. Number 2 is the retail size. I know you commented on that, but I wanted to offer a possible solution if it would entertain me. And this also goes back to the RFP request. So when the RFP was written, it said, this is section 4 of the RFP, on the use and overall design. It says, in accordance with the design standards and guidance with zoning bylaw, the redevelopment must engage Maple Avenue with active doorways and non-residential uses on the ground floor. Development along Maple Avenue should be prioritized to be vertical mixed use with commercial, retail, with residential or office above. So, of course, as you clearly stated, there is no new rendering from an architectural perspective yet. However, if we reference the existing rendering, we know that about 1/3 to about 40% of the Maple Avenue ground level layout is residential focused. Right? There's a residential amenity, there's a fitness room, there's a community room, there's a amenity lounge, there's a leasing office, and then there's a circulation space. Of course, circulation space is probably required, so whatever. But those other spaces, roughly, they're about 3,500 square feet. If you were possibly to move 3,500 square feet of that residential, which was not requested from the RFP perspective, move that to Haskell, that would mean that you would reduce about 5 to 6 units. And that also take care of the fact that the patio, which is not included in that square footage, my personal view, should not be a private space. I know there was some discussion here about that maybe that's less a reduced size now, but in any case, that could move to the backside in that new carved out space, which no longer is the driveway access for the under area parking. So there's your reduction, 5 or 6 units, and satisfies the RFP from a perspective of what is on Maple Avenue ground level. Seems clear to me. Third, handicapped parking. I know the handicapped parking is a minor in terms of the relative size of units, but we do have to be cognizant of handicapped parking. There will be handicap units throughout the building for residential. The original proposal had some dedicated handicapped spots in the underside part, but By relocating them to the retail space, you're also putting the residents at a disadvantage for not having any handicap spaces. And there's a long distance between, if you're focusing at the retail entrance, if you're a resident, how would you get to your space? If you're using a walker, if you're using a wheelchair, uncovered spaces, farther away access. So I think that, I don't know if there's any regulation in this space, but perhaps what happens in the event when there is a handicap unit resident that requires to have a handicap space? Is that the town regulates that? Do they say, okay, you must offer a space that's assigned to resident 103, that kind of space? So I think that's a third one to consider. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Molino. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name's John Shabelli. I live at 38 Knowlton Ave, one street over from Wesleyan. And there's a lot of concerns about this project, but before I get into my quick concerns, and I'll be as quick as I can, I want to thank the developers for the project that they've presented and the way that they're going about it. I know it can be very difficult, and I ask that they just have patience and work with the community, and hopefully we can get to a good resolution at the end. Thank you to the planning board for bringing in a peer-reviewed traffic study. I wanted to focus on the traffic study. I think that's new information. I have a bunch of concerns I'm going to try to go through pretty quickly. I'd like to ask a couple of questions, if I can, for information with the developer. For example,
Through the chair, please.
through the chair, sir. I see in other development projects, and I'm thinking about one that's very parallel to this. It's the redevelopment of a school in our area, where the developer has outlined, I don't know how they do this, but how many residents they will allow per unit. I haven't seen that information anywhere in the project here, and I'm wondering if there are limitations. For example, a two-bedroom unit. We all know housing can be expensive, and I'm wondering, it's conceivable, say four people could come to rent a two-bedroom unit. I'm wondering if the developers have an idea of what the maximum residential capacity would be at the present level of 55 units.
Yes. Sir.
So I don't know the answer of whether there is a local ordinance that limits the number of unrelated persons in a unit, for example, but Mass Sanitary Code is what dictates the maximum number of residents in a space.
So when somebody signs a lease or whatever agreement they're going to have, they're not going to be, for instance, I know when my daughter went to college, I had to sign saying that there would be no more than X number of people residing at that space. Is that something that this development would require as well?
So I would like to defer that to when I can talk to the property manager, because I am reasonably sure that fair housing laws are an essential part of this answer, and discriminate.
So just take it as no, you'd be ready for
And I ask that question because it has a trickle-down impact on everything, right down to traffic counts, parking, cars available. I know that in the peer study, they use standards from the Urban Land Institute, and I forget what the numbers were. But everything on all the traffic information study, I think is what it's called, it's all built upon a hard number of vehicles, hard number of anticipated traffic movements every day. But I can't find where that's based on people. So I think that's a concern, and I think that could skewer everything from the get-go. So that's why I bring that up. Mm-hmm. The peer review. I took a lot of things. I tried to read the report top to bottom, and I took a few things out of it. And one is, MDM, which I know as you points out several times. I see the phrase in there, post-occupancy monitoring to validate controls, to ascertain needs for remedial countermeasures. For post-occupancy remedial countermeasures. I interpret that to mean if our number, and these might be my personal biases, but I read that to mean, and if we're off in any way, after the fact, you guys have to think about some post-occupancy fixes, post-occupancy remedial measures. That's kind of scary. And I read that comment 3 times in the traffic
Just so you know,
report.
that's a pretty common
Yeah.
strategy, and we've done it on many a site plan here, because we have what we anticipate what
Right.
happens. Because there might be some concern about that, we'll put in a decision at
Sure.
a period of time, sometimes it's 6 months, sometimes it's a
Sure.
year. Review, are we still okay? If we're still okay, fine. If we're not okay, then the developer is required to come up with mitigating measures.
Got it. As I went through the traffic study, I was hoping that there was like an brief executive summary at the start or a brief conclusion at the end. And I understand what a peer review is. And I know the peer reviews, their job is not to take a position one way or the other. But I think it would be very helpful for people who live in the area to be able to read the study, be able to come to the conclusion to answer this question. How's it going to impact my ability to get in and out of my home every day, 5 days a week to go to work? And that's hard to ascertain, no disrespect. I think the comparison, as you mentioned, about Beal School is a false equivalency. We all know school was from 8 to 4 p.m., Mondays through Fridays, no weekends, no holidays, really no activity in July and August. This is a residential property. I don't think it serves anybody any good to use the traffic levels from Beal in this particular instances. I just think it's not even an
Understood.
apples to apples comparison. The density per acre that was brought up, I think that is also inaccurate. I don't know the street address of the building right next to Beal School where the optometrist is at the traffic light. I know that there are 10 apartment units in there. That building must have been built at least 100 years ago. I don't think it's fair to take the conditions that existed that allowed 10 units in that small piece of property and extrapolate that out to the footprint at Beal and say, okay, because of the density allowances, this property, this site is appropriate for X number, 55 units, whatever the case may be. I'm kind of skipping around, and I'm going to try to wrap up. What I took from the traffic study, what I took from the density report, I could only come to the conclusion that, as the board stated, I think the total unit size here is just a little bit too much. I'm in favor of the redevelopment of the Beal School. It's inevitable that it's going to happen. I personally think residential use of that property is ideal. I personally think you guys are about a third too big, in my own personal opinion. The gentleman before me said a reduction of 5 or 6 spaces. I honestly don't think that that's enough. I think you have to get it down at least a third, so from 55 down to, 30, 38, 40, 42 units to make it fit into the neighborhood, because once you guys are done with it, it's done. And there's really no going back. And it's really the planning board's duty, as you folks all know, to try to get it right to the best of your ability. I'll just wrap up really quickly. Concord, you talked about floor area ratios in Concord. Tell me if there's I know downtown Concord, I'm not aware that there's one building that has 55 residential units in it. I may be wrong, but I don't think so. Hudson, can we please leave the Hudson out of the equation? Hudson just does not work, right? We all know Hudson is a great success story. But the downtown Hudson area has a multitude of buildings that are 4-story, 5-story that were built 100 years ago. We don't have that here. We all know
Understood.
that. So I think sometimes you guys can, and I understand you have to, find good examples that will strengthen your argument, but I think we really need to focus on the community right here. So that's pretty much it. I think getting to talk about architectural finishes is a little bit early in the process. I think the transportation study is what's the newest thing, and I expect that we're going to be having multiple public hearings going forward. But I just think that we have to be careful, and again, don't give in, don't give up. If you guys have the patience, I think that we can get there, and I think ultimately we can have a good project that'll benefit the community.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience? Just me. Oh, no, sorry, sir.
Laura Beaton, 41 Surrey Lane. Can you all hear me? Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to address the board. I apologize in advance if there's redundancy in my statement, but I would like to deliver it. I've spent the last 24 years working in the multifamily industry, underwriting and originating over $10 billion worth of apartment loans across the country. For my entire career, it has been my job to analyze multifamily projects such as this and identify issues. This experience, along with my review of all the available materials and viewing all of the public meetings, inform my comments here. I have serious reservations about the impact of this project for several reasons that we all share, but mainly from a traffic congestion perspective. I have other thoughts on the overall process that led us here, but will focus my comments solely on the shortcomings of the specific proposed development. Briefly on parking, it's been talked to death, absolutely. Until we determine what the commercial uses are, we have absolutely no idea. So, we're trying to throw a dart at a board, and it's just going to be very hard to determine. I think one of the comments or one of the ideas that I've heard is that it's going to be the role of the property manager and the maintenance manager, the part-time maintenance manager, to be walking the parking lot and sort of managing that, which I think is kind of unreasonable, because I think, for 1.5 employees at a property this size, they're going to have their hands absolutely full with leasing and, resident issues and maintenance issues. I don't see that being a solution to the parking. And again, we don't know what the commercial tenancy is going to be, so we can't know. I think if we have 2 tenants that are high volume tenants, cafe, restaurant, I actually don't see how a second tenant of high volume would possibly want to lease space at this property. So I think it might even be hard to get one tenant that's a high volume tenant, just because of the access of the traffic access and the parking issues. So on the traffic congestion, currently many of us avoid driving through the center during peak traffic hours, and we use streets like Wesleyan. I do. The existing congestion in the center of town is extremely disruptive to commuters and families during both morning and afternoon commute times. And for the developer to say that traffic flow will not materially differ from when the Beale School was in use it's hard for me to believe, honestly. And also, since we don't really know what it's going to be going forward, it's sort of another moving target. So I think if we have a coffee shop and a restaurant and these potentially 80 drivers residing at the property, all trying to come and go through a single ingress egress from Haskell, which I think having a single ingress egress for a property this size is unusual. And as a lender, we would say, wait, there's only one way in or out. That's in and of itself an issue. But to have all of that going on, I think is going to create a situation that is just congestion that is just absolutely not acceptable for our community. And I think we've talked about the issues with Wesleyan. So both ends of Wesleyan, too narrow for 2 cars to pass. Those streets have to be widened. There's absolutely no way that we can have that be a main thoroughway and not have it wide enough for 2 cars. So absent additional traffic lights, turning lanes, do not block designations, and roadway improvements, including the widening of Wesleyan at some parts, and even maybe designating some of these streets as one way, I see no scenario in which 55 residential units plus undefined commercial tenants are feasible while maintaining any reasonable traffic levels. I think that this development, as currently drafted, is a net negative to the community and would be a detriment to the town center. Furthermore, I don't think $150,000 of net tax revenue per year is worth any of these consequences, intended or unintended. I understand and applaud the desire to attract more people and drive more business to the center, but I feel strongly that this will actually lead to even more people avoiding the center. My recommendation is a reduction in the number of residential units, checks and balance measures for the leasing of the commercial space, in addition to traffic control measures and roadway improvements. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Okay. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Tyndall. I live at technically 1 Birchwood Drive, but it's 9 Spruce Street. I've lived here all my life. I went to school at Beale School. I applaud you that you all say that this is too big and should be scaled down. I'm sorry to the folks here that you had to go through the so-called dog and pony show before coming here, and that it has caused a big disconnect between the residents and the town hall. I honestly think it is too big a project for that, where it is. Can someone tell me that the size of the Beal School that's there now compared to what's being proposed, how, is it 2 times the size? 3 times the size of the building that's there?
Rough guess,
Roughly?
roughly twice.
Twice the size. So if it was half the size, we'd have the green space, we'd have more parking. The parking along Haskell Street, are they widening Haskell Street, or are they leaving Haskell the
I believe
same?
Haskell Street remains the same.
So Haskell Street is a town-owned street.
Correct.
There is no parking after midnight on the street. Are they counting those spaces as part of their?
No, the Haskell Street parking is not inclusive to this project.
So they're not going to widen it at all, it's going to stay the small street that it is?
It's my understanding, yes. The applicant can confirm.
You folks had asked for one of the project that got continued, Greenbrier, to downsize it. And I think they're really considering it. I hope you folks consider it. The town is saying it's too big a property. Have you cut down on the commercial space because there's so many open storefronts in the center of town?
All right, we just want, you can answer that question, please.
Through the chair, no.
Okay, but what I'm really not looking for is questions like that. I'm looking for specific issues with the site. I think we brought up our concern relative to the retail space being reduced as it stands. That's a good question. I'm not saying it's not, but I just don't want this to turn into a kind of a conversation with me in the middle.
Yeah.
With the applicant, okay?
The Trader Joe's project, didn't they just do away with their small parking spaces and want to reconfigure that?
I don't have
Was that
information
part
on
of?
that. Mr. McGoldrick, do you have any information? I don't believe so.
No, I don't believe so, and frankly, the Trader Joe's project is not
Right, it's not
relevant.
Right, I'm
tonight.
just comparing it, that if a project down there had small parking places and then now doing away with it because it wasn't working, why are we going to a small parking configuration?
Not to my knowledge. Are you talking about the reserve parking that was proposed tonight?
No, they said that on the new plan is that they've cut down the size of the parking.
They've made, the de minimis change showed some minor modifications to the spaces.
No, because he's saying this particular project has, was it 23 compact spaces that are, they're compact spaces, yes.
But didn't Trader Joe's say they were doing away because it just wasn't workable for them?
No, Trader, the one that de minimis change that just passed is they had that banked parking similar to what this project is proposing, that they're executing to. They're
Okay,
actually
I
executing to less than
misunderstood.
what they had initially asked for, though.
I misunderstood. I just think that it should go back to the drawing board and kind of make it smaller.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Elizabeth Merrill, Francis Ave, 24 Francis Ave. Has anyone addressed snow removal and water runoff?
At a previous meeting, I brought up snow removal. They have snow, these plans are not plans, so you
Mhm, I
wouldn't be able to
understand.
see where they're going to be located. But should a snow event happen that the snow storage areas are inadequate, they would be required to truck it off-site.
And where would it be trucked? Do we know?
Off-site.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. Good morning. It's been a long time.
Let's hope it's not going to get there again.
Good morning again, that's right. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Claire O'Neill. I've lived in Precinct 5 for 20 years at this point, despite the accent. I'm both an educated and work professionally as a planner, and I work for Mass Development. I'm accredited with the American Institute of Certified Planners. And together with, I know, several other attendees this evening, I'm proud to have played an active role in the long-term efforts to revitalise Shrewsbury Town Centre. And, you know, I'm also very proud that we have a very established and professional staff in Shrewsbury who've put a lot of work into revitalising the town centre over the past decade, almost. In 2020, this board and the town meeting supported the creation of the town centre zoning district with a view to foster the development of vibrant mix of civic, commercial, institutional, residential and open spaces, all within close proximity of one another, to create that vibrant downtown. We want to create attractive, walkable neighbourhoods, and we want to promote reasonable access to parking, given the amount of both public and private parking within 800 feet of this particular site. Those zoning changes didn't happen overnight. It followed substantial public outreach, engagement, and community planning processes. And you're aware of all of the studies and charrettes and engagement that were led by the professional planning staff and city manager's office. So I guess in conclusion, I'm encouraged by what I've seen this evening. I believe personally that Civico brings a good project to benefit the town centre and the community of Shrewsbury. There are definitely tweaks that need to be made. There always are in development projects. We can't foresee everything that will happen. I love the land banking idea for the parking, but I also want to caution that there's a lot of emphasis in these conversations about parking. And yes, we have to provide and ensure reasonable access to parking, but parking is not something that is going to be the all-encompassing solution to a vibrant downtown. And so I just want to encourage the board and thank the board and all the residents of Shrewsbury for your passion about this, and ask that you continue to support the ideals of the town centre zoning and really encourage new investment, new tens of millions of dollars of investment in our downtown, which is very important, and create new vibrant spaces. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Is that, yes. Yes.
I'm Charles Garabini, Precinct 2. I promise I will not repeat what I had said previous. Just one word. We have a lot of contradictions. Contradictions lead to bigger problems. I rest on that. Secondly, everyone's talking about Haskell Street and Wesleyan. On Westmont Road and Gage Lane, in the past 31 years since I've been in Shrewsbury, I clearly have seen there's been an increase in traffic, especially during the morning and the evening. And I know what people are doing. They're avoiding the center of town, as I do. Unfortunately, I didn't know that this day was going to come. If I had, I would have counted cars every year and to show you statistically what the percentage of increase of traffic is. Nobody has talked about those two streets, but there's going to be an impact there, and I'm concerned about that. If this project does go through the way you have planned it, it's definitely going to increase, because I see what cars are doing right now. And you can come with me and I'll show you any afternoon, Monday through Friday. That's the first thing I have to say about this particular project. Let us go back to the very beginning. Why are we tearing this building down? I don't want an answer. But I say that building is still a good building. We have use for that building. Nobody has talked about the following that I have heard. And if I'm incorrect, please correct me. I do understand that at the former Hale building, the Hale Drugstore building, the school department is going to open up a store there. And that store is going to be run by, I would say, special education students, which is, I think, a great project. we're going to have to pay money to sit there. There's going to be a town expenditure of rent. The school department and the town are strapped for money as it is. There is another expenditure that I don't think we can afford. But we can avoid that if we took the Beal School,
I'm going
invest
to
some
interrupt
money.
you here, because at the outset of this hearing, what I made very clear is we're not here to discuss how we got here and what other projects may
In other
be
words,
better
we can't-
benefits. We're talking specifically
Right.
about what this plan is.
So we can't go back then.
We cannot go back. I'm not going back. All we can
All
deal
right.
with is what is in front of us, okay? So what was and how we got here is immaterial. We're
At least
here.
I've got the idea that that building still can be used.
Well,
And I
that-
wish that we'd go back and start from scratch, as they say. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Hi, Ron Hughes, Westwood Road. I heard the number again today, that we're gonna get $150,000 a year in revenue. Well, we're not. We're gonna lose between $30,000 and $40,000 a year with this project. And what nobody has ever done is look at what's the service burden versus the tax on different units. Every unit, there's four different taxed parcels, but it's a common tax, right? There's one tax for the whole thing. For residential, every dollar that comes in, the town spends $1.44. For commercial, every dollar that comes in, the town spends 57 cents. I went through with their high and low revenue numbers for the commercial, for the residential, for cars, meals tax, the gross revenue, and it all comes down to $40,000 and $28,000 for the high and the low. Now, the one that works is the commercial, and they're reducing it. I don't know how we're gonna do this.
Understood. And I know that you gave me your sheets at the last meeting that this was continued for me to review. I did review them. I'm not a financial analyst, so I'm not going to dispute how you came with the calculations, but that's not something that I think we're in a position to discuss here right now, is your interpretation of where the values are.
Well, it's not an interpretation. I mean, these are numbers based on what the town assessor says we're paying for $1.44 for every dollar collected under residential, and 57 cents for every dollar collected under commercial. And when you run the numbers based on that, it's a loss every year. Not, they're talking 150, 200, they got it up to close to
So
250.
what I'll do is I'll take that information that you've provided to me, and what I'll ask the applicant to do is go back, revisit their calculations they did for their financials, for supporting the project, to make sure they're in line with what you're bringing up in terms.
Everything that they're saying is absolutely correct. It's the application of the town's money based on residential or commercial that nobody's considered, which is what makes this a losing proposition.
Very good. Thank you. You have anything else you want to add?
The building height?
Go ahead.
The town, one of your, you're looking to go to 40 feet over 35 feet. The building to the top ridge is 34 feet. When you put 6 feet more up, which raises the roof 12 feet, you end up with a 4-point-something pitch, 4.62, I believe. That's not a pitch that is in a commercial, in a colonial thing. That's less than you'd have on a ranch. And somebody had brought up earlier about the dormers. If you put the dormer on a 4.6, it'd be looking at the sky.
So
there'd be skylights.
So one of the things that this board has asked for, and we've gotten completed is an architectural review that the response from the architectural reviewer they're working through right now. I don't know, Mr. McGoldrick, if you want to just follow up with them on this, the height and the pitch, if that's part of the design standards. I don't believe they are.
I believe they are, and I believe the architecture peer review did review those and found them substantially adequate, but I can go back.
Because if they
and
lower
take a
it to
look.
2 stories in the front, you lose a lot of units.
I
I don't know how
understand.
bad, I think Haskell Street is better because you don't have the 11 feet on the first floor.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else that wishes to be heard? Yes.
Moira Miller, 4 Cabot Drive. I am also president of the Shrewsbury Town Center Association, but I'm here tonight speaking to you with my thoughts and my comments as Moira Miller, resident and taxpayer in the community. So thank you. And I'll respect your request not to repeat things, but I am going to talk a little bit about parking and traffic because I'd like to offer just a little different perspective, I think, things that haven't been said. So I know parking and traffic are always concerns expressed whenever any development project is proposed. We all go through it. We all know. Most recently, this was the case with the projects that became Lakeway Commons on Route 9 and the Market Basket on Route 20. Many of the same concerns about increased traffic flow, cars cutting through adjacent neighborhoods, impact on neighborhoods were all brought up and they were addressed and mitigated. And the shops and restaurants at Lakeway Commons have become a vibrant, integrated part of business and life in our town that we all can enjoy. And I'm confident that the concerns expressed by this project will be satisfactorily worked out by this planning board and the developer. And I agree with the comments made by Mr. Schiavelli and Ms. O'Neill, and comments, some other comments here, that those are going to be worked out by competent members of our planning board. Specific to parking, I'd like to reference the Yuletide Market, like the Common event that happens at the Town Common. This event is held on the first Saturday in December, the holiday, height of the holiday season. Saturday prime time hours is 4 to 8 p.m. People are already out and about, and that's when we hold the Yuletide Market. First year, 2019, attendance was estimated at about 2,000 people. There was no market in 2020 because of COVID restrictions. So in 2021, we were able to have the market again, and attendance was at an estimated 3,000 people. In 2022, this past December, attendance was a bit less because you may remember there was bad weather, wind and rain during the earlier part of the day. But the miracle happened and the sun came out and right at 4 o'clock and people came out, and the estimates are still 1,500 towards 2,000. So that's an awful lot of people coming into our town center on a Saturday evening on a cold December night. The important points to take away from this Yuletide Market experience, I think, are that all of these people of all ages found parking for this event. The first year that we had it, we contacted businesses and private owners in the area, and we asked if they would allow us to put their locations on a map so people could go there. Without hesitation, every one of them said yes. So that speaks to the ability to work shared parking agreements. The past year, we didn't even do that, and people found the parking. They parked and they walked to the Common, which is exactly what we envision and we want to see in the village setting of our Shrewsbury Town Center. And businesses in the center, like Willie's and Amici's and Shrewsbury Country Shop and others, they saw the increased activity. So people didn't just stay at the Yuletide Market. They came there, they might have eaten at a food truck, but they also patronized the other businesses. So people want opportunities to enjoy our beautiful historic town center, and they'll come if there's something of interest. The Yuletide Market, I think, can be viewed as a proof of concept for the vision that was articulated in the 2016 master plan. And that vision was to promote the town center as a pedestrian-friendly shopping and service area and a neighborhood gathering place. And the Beal Commons proposal fits into this vision. Again, you'll work out all of these details, but the proposal fits the vision. The additional public parking spaces will further boost accessibility for people to park and walk. Again, that's the concept we keep hearing. They'll do it to the Beal Commons, and then they'll also do it to other town center destinations. So in respect for time and not repeating, I just want to here tonight express my support for this project. It's in line with the vision and the objectives that have been identified through the open public process that resulted in the 2016 master plan, the Beal Reuse Committee report, town center visioning study, and the town center parking study. It'll revitalize our town center, and it'll act as a catalyst for renovation and reinvestment. We're already seeing buildings in the town center being purchased by local people, Shrewsbury people, not out-of-town people anymore. And they're doing that because they see the vision and they see what's coming. And I don't think anyone can walk, ride, bike, whatever you want to do through the town center without agreeing. There's one thing we can agree, it sorely needs a catalyst. Offers several other benefits for our community, and the 20 parking spaces allocated for public parking, along with the 10 spaces on Haskell Street, I think after tonight those are still correct numbers, they will supplement and allow easy access to the Beal Commons businesses and the other town center destinations. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. All right, is there any other questions or comments of something new? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Krista Dupre, Candlewood Way. I was just looking for a couple of clarifications, if I may. My apologies for not knowing these off the top of my head. But could you clarify the setback from the actual Maple Ave? How far back is this building?
Applicant. Yes, please.
20 feet.
Approximately 20 feet. There is setback requirements in the zone.
Okay.
And they will be behind the memorial.
Right, the memorial is.
Behind the memorial.
Is actually going to increase that.
So 20 feet beyond, continuance behind the memorial? Is that what you're saying? Or from the curb?
The memorial would be the deepest setback. The setback from Haskell Street is about 20 feet. Does that seem reasonable?
From the edge of the sidewalk. Yeah.
From the edge of the sidewalk, yes.
What is it, Chris?
From the edge of the sidewalk. I was going to say from the actual right-of-way is closer to 40 feet. But again, that's the original design. They're still redesigning that slightly.
Okay. Thank you for that. My other clarification question is, I know a gentleman did sort of ask this question before, and it's sort of come up, especially with the gables and the pitch of the roof. But how much taller is this from the actual Beal School now?
I think it's 6 feet. Does that seem right? Because I know you're going for a waiver to go to the 40 feet, right? It's currently 34 feet, from my understanding, going to 40.
Okay.
At the highest point.
At the highest points. Okay.
Not the highest point, midpoint and roof.
No, it's the highest point. Right?
Mr. Chairman, point of information, if I may.
Sure.
At a previous public hearing, I asked that specific question, and Kristen Lass said the project as presented would not be higher than the present peak on the present Beal building. And I believe that's part of the public record. That's what I remember her saying.
I don't recall that myself, but.
I did.
So we're getting clarification. Do you have another question while he's looking that up?
I guess my point is in looking at the setback, and I fully understand, obviously, building the development, looking at different ways to do things, looking at all of the rules, regulations, bylaws, et cetera, especially also with the new information of the town center, which is great, that is what is concerning to me. 20 feet of a setback and looking straight up. That, to me, that's what would make that street and project overwhelming. Very overwhelming. Just that visual. I almost feel like it would be making our street feel even smaller. And I say this because I used to live out in Western Mass. We visited Northampton and Amherst quite often. Those particular towns, their streets are much wider. They have on-street parking, numerous on-street parking, as well as the parking behind the businesses. Yes, Hudson has parking behind the businesses, and I know it's apples and oranges. And unfortunately, our on-street parking has just been taken away within the past year, I believe. So I now can't pull up to my ophthalmologist right in the center of town. I can't. I have to then go find other parking, which is fine. But I think of the scope of the building, of understanding the view, and what makes me think of that is when the Lakeway Commons were built. And it was a little more daunting than people anticipated, meaning the scope and size, especially in comparison to what was already there. So the other thing I wanted to bring up, I know I do have a concern about, which I know is redundant, of the retail portion being decreased. Again, going back to Western Mass, Northampton, Amherst, many of their retail spaces go up. Thorns Market, look it up. Thorns Market is huge. Very eclectic, eccentric places. There's restaurants in it. There was a bakery that was 2 stories tall, and it was fabulous to go to. So to me, you can almost increase your retail space by going up, as well as decreasing the units. So I don't know if that's something to think about, if that's a possibility for the developer, but to look at retail space differently. Yes, there's foot traffic in and out, but there are different places to walk into and sit and spend and take your time, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I'll try to keep from coughing, thank you. Just I have a very more specific question. Thank you very much for all of your efforts, and thank you guys for all of your adjustments. On that green area you were putting on Haskell, there was talk at the select board meeting that that might be changed to parking later. I just wanted clarification on that.
Yes, would you like to?
So just to restate, the area that we are proposing for what I referred to this evening as the community garden, that area occupies the former footprint of the building. And so when we reduced the footprint by approximately 40 feet in that space that was left behind, we proposed the community garden. Now, based on the layout of the parking lot, we can accommodate an easy expansion for 12 parking spaces if we were to then remove the community garden. So if you'll notice on the drawing, there's essentially a curb cut preparing for the possible future expansion. So we essentially queue it up and then at a further date evaluate if we need to replace the green space with more parking.
So would there be a way to keep it green rather than additional parking?
It would stay, the idea behind this is it would stay green until such time as the use dictates that they need additional parking.
Okay, all right. And who would control that, actually?
I'm sure the tenants would be going to the leaseor to say,
Okay.
we need more parking. We may have something that comes through the town offices that asks us to engage
I see.
the applicant to consider it.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. Brian Ladowski, Old Mill Road. First, I'd like to comment on Miss Miller's comments on the Lakeway Commons. She doesn't live on Old Mill Road, and you guys snuck in another 30 apartments across the street from there that are being built right now. Am I correct in that number? Across from Lakeway Commons, there's another 30 apartments being built.
There's the same amount of apartments there that was there existing. They just redid the building.
Okay. So, for the record, I spent 20 years of my previous career in road reconstruction and retired 10 years ago. So I have a good grasp on, worked in 50 towns within Central Mass highway projects, as well as the city of Worcester. The infrastructure in the center of town cannot be modified. You can't modify West Main Street or East Main Street towards Northborough or 140. So you're going to bottleneck that traffic in town, and that's where our fire headquarters are. So you tell me, if a fire truck has to get out and that's bottlenecked with traffic, someone's house is burning or someone's loved one is dying and they can't get there, it's going to be on the town. and I can guarantee there'll be lawsuits against the town. The project should be cut in half. Give them 20 apartments, make it retail. Don't we want a balance in town of retail and residential? Isn't that what we want as a community? There's already too many apartments. You've got 240 next to Market Basket. But the infrastructure cannot handle that traffic flow. It's impossible. I go through that every day to go to work right now. And I wait sometimes by Danielson Florist to get home because the traffic's backed up so bad. The traffic consultant, who was that? Did the town hire that traffic consultant, or did the developer?
That's the town hires the peer reviewer.
So you were hired by the town. All right. So this really has to be looked at, because this infrastructure cannot handle the flow as it is right now.
I think
And
we
you're
get
gonna add to it.
we get your point, and
Yeah.
we've heard this many a time, so I don't
But
want to
you just
belabor
gotta-
it,
but
okay? We
I'm
get
just
it.
gonna say, if there's a problem, now it's gonna fall on your shoulders if you okay this, because once it's done, you can't undo it.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, yes, ma'am.
I actually live on Wesleyan Street and no intention of speaking. So this is just an idea I had because I have 2 teenage boys. And they really, my youngest frequents that park a lot. And with the building that's going up and everything that's happened, there's been, and also a lot of talk around town, if you're on the Facebook site, where do the kids go, right? There's been a lot of complaints. They're going to Dunkin's, the library, they're getting yelled at. And one of the things that the town may want to consider is putting in a space there for the kids. I mean, literally, this is off the top of my head, but I would gladly pay $25 to you instead of the YMCA for my kid to have somewhere to go after school. And he doesn't need to drive. You know what I mean?
Understood.
That's like,
Again, I think your point is something that
that's,
needed to be done
beneficial.
long before we are here. Good.
Okay,
That-
fair enough.
Okay,
Like I
but thank
said,
you for the idea.
Sure.
Anyone, yes, sir. I would like to try to wrap this up, but this is going to be continued again, just so you understand, okay? So please, let's see if we can wrap this up a little bit.
Peter Welland. I feel sorry for you guys.
Name and address,
Oh,
please.
Peter Welland, 278 Prospect.
Thank you.
I feel sorry for you guys. You're trying to keep this on track. You have a limited scope, and people are coming up with all these crazy ideas, and you might be like, what are these people thinking? Well, part of it is that our dictatorial board doesn't allow public
Well,
comment.
let's not get into personal.
Well, yeah, but I'm just trying to tell you what's going on.
But
And
please,
they allow
please,
one-sided Putin propaganda from the developers, so you get the brunt of it. So I feel sorry for you guys. I genuinely do. But we have to listen to their one-sided argument. I went to the last select board meeting, and what did we hear about? You know, wanting to buy land for 800 something. How much was it? $860,000, while they gave away land to the developer. So here you are. You're facing stiff opposition from the town. I mean, is this normal to have this many people? I don't think so, right? And you have a developer who won't go away because there's no other incompetent select board that gives away land.
Please, let's not get with the,
So
no, please, the personal
you're in a
comments, they
tough
have to
position,
stop, sir.
but that's the
Sir,
bottom line.
please.
That's the bottom line,
Please,
folks.
okay, okay. if we're-
Recall election, perhaps?
Okay, all right, so,
We're not gonna put up with slander with
please,
people.
please, let's try to keep the decorum in order, okay? All right, I'll open one more question. Yes, ma'am.
I probably should sit closer because I keep talking. Okay, Julie Ross, 18 Haskell Street. I'm going to stay within the confines as you've requested and all. I have a couple of questions that are kind of administrative and then just a couple of just general comments. Regarding the administrative, how is the neighborhood going to be notified what the decision is here? Especially as a butters. As you've heard me say, I live at third base at the current
When the
ballpark.
process comes to the end?
Yes.
There is no notification to, it's incumbent on the residents to either be present, go to town hall, all this stuff is public information.
So a butters within 300 feet do get a letter mailed to them noticing them of the decision.
Oh, I apologize.
Thank you. Yeah, that was what I meant. I
was thinking.
I was going to let you
I
finish
was
the
thinking more
sentence before I
worldly.
said, wait. Yeah, because that was really, kind of, I recognize on the agenda, it says
90-day, you have 90 days, so I was wondering what would happen at the end of that 90 days. I should have been more clear. Thank you. So we will get a notice on that? Or do we just see the excavator show up and know, oh, I guess it went through?
So, yeah, so the, just to be clear, so the abutters on the abutter notice that are provided, that's the 300-foot from the site, those identified abutters will get a written notice of the decision when it is filed. The general public beyond that will not.
Okay.
You don't get a notice for building permits, so, you know, I certainly would encourage you to track the project if it gets to that stage. And in our
I've been
office-
trying. I've been
Yeah.
showing up so far, so
Yeah, in
good.
our
I've been
office,
showing
we'll
up all the
facilitate
time.
that as well, yeah.
I just, a little bit, again, this is more administrative than not. And the context here is that the town has already signed an agreement with Savicchio Greeley. So within that confines, how many restrictions is a planning board under in terms of what it can do? In other words, are you only allowed to tweak the outside, or do you have the authority to just say no?
We've been discussing the site plan and have been communicating back with the applicant in the presence of the public.
Yeah, I know.
That we don't have any restriction. We look at the plan and try to get the plan to work as best as it can in the area of wherever it's going to be. So we're not told that you can't do this.
Okay.
We may get to a point where they're saying that's not something that we'd be interested in doing, but that's not a restriction for us, as far as I understand.
In your evaluations then, as you're working your way through this, and I too, as I've mentioned before, am a professional planner, 25 years experience. I have a degree in it as well. When you are evaluating the pros and cons of any project and or program that you're going to put in, you always have some criteria by which you evaluate things, and some things have a greater weighting than other. And I'm wondering if I had an epiphany over the past couple of weeks. I'll keep it real short and sweet. But I've noticed that planning in the town does not stand by itself. It's planning and economic development. And I kind of said, ooh, are you required when you're evaluating the project, because we've heard so much about that this will be a revenue producing, hopefully it does. But are you required in your evaluation to give that a greater weight? That it would make more money coming into the town than it would if it were just left as open space?
I'll speak for myself.
Okay.
I balance all my decisions on things such as our rules and regulations. We have districts that have certain rules and regulations specific to them.
Zoning,
We
town,
have
special
all-
projects,
we have-
all of
we
the
have
above. I speak this language. I'm a planner.
Okay,
I
so
get it.
we've done master plan, we've got a number of directions of us to review.
Mhm.
And when we look at a plan, we balance, I don't put a weight one higher than the other on a consistent basis. I have to kind of put it all in a stew, and I just look at it as one, and I come up with a decision at that point.
Okay.
That's me.
Okay, well, that's good to know. We've heard so much about the revenue producing, and I've just kind of been wondering if the open space that we have hoped for had even a snowball's chance, as they say. And we've been reaching out to the town about that park, about the ballpark, since April of 2021. And,
So
it has
that
been
open
a
space is going to be
consistent
conveyed
2-year.
back to the community once, should this project go forward and it's completed.
Yep.
That open space goes back to the community, and the community can do what it chooses.
I get that, and a much smaller than what it is now. But I get it, I get it. though. It's all
0.75
part-
acres, it's not a small space. It's,
Well, we've got almost 4 now.
I understood.
And I've been there just a little bit shy of 40 years. We didn't even have that. We had 2 ball fields there at one time.
Okay.
So I'm kind of seeing it get smaller and smaller and smaller, kind of to that point. About this site plan itself, and this is where I kind of had the epiphany. My own background, we all have our own, we bring our own, experience to the table. I was really looking forward to the architectural review. And what I saw when I looked it up online was basically the site plan. Again, with few modifications here, there, and everywhere. My first career was driving a tour bus. I know I told you I have a CDL. And I kind of recognized most of that work was with a microphone on my head, 32 consecutive years talking about New England. So an architectural review, I was psyched. I was going to look at the colonials. Are they Federalist? Are they Georgian? We've got this beautiful piece of the Old Post Road. Christopher Wren and James Gibbs, his protege, you know, architects that designed the church, the whole 9 yards, you know. And what reference I saw to the architecture was we're going to use clapboards. Sorely disappointed. So it's okay. That's when I realized, that's when my epiphany came. I'm lucky enough to have a structural engineer in the family. So I sent him a text the other day. What does architectural review mean to you? And I realized we're not talking to each other. There are so many things that are going on here. We all use our jargon. We all use our own life experience in what we value. And I'm not really sure that planning as it's supposed to be is all that well represented here, and that's getting concerning. I worked with engineers for 25 years, elbow to elbow. We complement each other. We do a great job when we work together. But when one side isn't getting the full vision of what planning is, you have a lot of problems with it. And you know, I even found myself this week looking up books from grad school. And there's this process that's incremental planning. You lose sight of the goal. You're just putting out fires
I
here, there,
understand.
and everywhere.
Could we just
And-
kind of wrap this up, please?
Yeah, okay, I will. With that in mind, getting back to the site plan, one of the slides we saw last time was where they're going to put all the snowbanks. Those snowbanks are going to be a big part of it, pushed down to where our leftover park is going to be. And that is probably going to make our park a 3-season park. We're not going to have access to it in the winter.
We will address the snow situation when we have physical plans, because that's a big condition that every one of us looks at.
Another thing I would ask you to seriously consider with that, automobiles, whether they are electric or fossil fuel charged, are dirty. And they put a whole lot of stuff into the parking lot. It's either oil or antifreeze or transmission fluid. If it's an electric car, it's still going to have windshield washer fluid. You're going to have brake dust coming off the brakes. Of this I know. This is what I did for 25 years at DEP. And what's going to happen, and it happens, it's physics. All the snow is going to get pushed down to where the park is. We're going to have 6,000 pounds of ice that's going to sit there and melt. That's going to really compact the soil. Any gardener will tell you you'll be lucky if you get chickweed to grow in that. You're not going to get, so you put up, you decide later, okay, we'll put in a swing set. So the kids are going to swing back and forth. Well, all that stuff that's been pushed there by the snow plows is going to turn into dust that the kids are going to end up breathing.
Understood.
Parts of that is going to be PM fine, 2.5 microns or smaller. Bypasses your nose hairs, gets into your lungs, the kids are going to be breathing that. Let's not do that.
Very
You
good.
know, and I
Understood.
guess
So I
just-
think, please be mindful of the snow challenges, where the snow storage will be
And the danger to
located.
the kids. I mean,
Understood.
okay. Just kind of one last little thing, and I promise I'll go away, because I think we're running out of time and we're allowed to talk to you guys. You did mention there might be another meeting or two.
There's definitely going to be another meeting.
Good, thank you. Okay, so I will save that then for this, but thank you. I know this is tough. The parts of this project that are great, I really like the idea of shared parking. I've mentioned that before. We'll end up with just everything in pavement, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
And keep working at it, thanks.
Thank you. All right.
I'll see you
And
next
I know
time,
there
too.
may still be hands raised. What's that? If it can be very brief, we still have, I'm serious, we've got other items that we have to get through too, and again, we will have another meeting, and again, this is all new information for us too, okay?
My name is Ann Dowen. I live at 108 Boylston Circle. What I want to say, yep, you can't go back. You're not going to have any problem renting apartments, okay? You're just not. Where's the retail? That is the walkability. So where's the retail? Why not? Why are we reducing it? And I'm glad that that other gentleman brought up infrastructure, okay? Because I live right behind the cemetery. We've gone through putting in new sewers, finally, after 30-something years. I lived there 32. Now we've been replacing water lines. Next is gas line. What's the infrastructure right there at Haskell and Main Street? I know they were working on Main Street, but infrastructure and schools, all the projects, schools. So, no problem renting apartments. Everybody needs apartments. We need retail to bring people to the center. And I don't know what you're going to do about the kids after school at the center, so that's another challenge, but.
Very good. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, with that, all right, Mr. Zios. Seriously, I'm going to ask that you be very brief, and I'm going to ask anybody else that have any other questions, anybody that has any other questions to please jot them down and have them for the next meeting, please. Okay, yes, Mr.
Paul Zekas, 1 Beaver Drive, and look, again, I want to compliment this board for the time and energy. We have people going through some of the records, the prior records and meetings, and the select board said 11 different times that the planning board will handle it. So that's kind of why you're just getting deluged. So we apologize for that. But one comment directed solely at the developer, and I think coming back to this board after they made it clear what they wanted to see with no less units and less commercial space is absolutely insulting, quite frankly. And you may have the support of the selectmen, but you do not have the support of this community. So keep that in mind.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. No, I'm going to ask everyone to please hold their questions to the next hearing. So I am going to ask for continue this public hearing.
I move that we continue the public hearing for 1 to 7 Maple Avenue, Beal Commons, site plan approval and special permit, Shrewsbury Haskell MM LLC, till the next meeting of the planning board on April 6th.
At 7 p.m.
7 p.m.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We do have more to go through, so if everyone could please have their conversations beyond the hall here. Thank you.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Yeah, well, we're going to take a moment to let this. All right.
Yeah.
I don't have a.
You need a pen? Guys, if you wouldn't mind taking it outside,
right.
We still have more
Mr.
stuff to
Ricker,
do.
please help us pull them outside. Thank you. All right. Our next item of business,
We'll get this.
once the quiet comes back to us. Sirs, could you take your conversation outside, please?
Guys, please.
Hey. Thank you.
John, please, we have more stuff to do.
Thank you.
Take care now.
And they'll say, they're out of here.
Not you.
Okay, our next item of business is a new public hearing. It's for zoning warrant articles for annual town meeting for 2023. Mr. Thomas, could you please read the public notice?
In accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 5, the Shrewsbury Planning Board will hold a special hearing on Thursday, March 2nd, 2023, at 7 p.m. in the Bent Presentation Room at Shrewsbury High School, 64 Holden Street, Shrewsbury, Mass., regarding proposed amendments to the Shrewsbury zoning bylaw as follows. Article, to see if the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaw of the town of Shrewsbury, Section 2, and definitions, and Section 6, Table 1, by inserting a definition for adult day health and adding said use to Table 1, or take any other action in relation thereto. Article, to see if the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaw of the town of Shrewsbury, Section 6, Table 1, footnotes for Table 1, by removing footnote 26, or take any other action in relation thereto.
Is that it? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. McGoldrick, would you like to explain? I know we've gone through this once before, but this is the first real public hearing for this, so please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. and members of the board. So again, these I'll put these two zoning articles together since we kind of
Yes,
noticed
please.
it that way. And as you mentioned, we've already discussed it. So these two articles really looking at, I think, revising first the adult day health to provide for additional provisions to long-term care facilities. This adult day health center would be something that would provide an alternative to typical live-in community services. It's seen a growth regionally in use and in interest. Other communities have similar uses in their towns. And what we're looking for, we've actually been approached, and there is interest to have this in town in reviewing our existing zoning. We didn't have this specifically called out in our zoning, and so it was excluded. And so we wanted to look at updating our zoning to provide for that use of adult day health, which is really allowing for alternative care to those nursing facilities. Again, we've indicated that those will be allowed by special permit by the planning board in various districts. I'll read those. And then of the districts that it would be allowed in would be the residence B2, multifamily 1, multifamily 2, apartment, limited business, town center district, commercial business, limited commercial business, neighborhood business, and office research and limited office research, looking at where those districts are, that they are the somewhat higher density and more conducive areas for this type of use. Again, they would still need to meet any of the dimensional and other lot requirements for such a use. The gas station, the other motion for the footnotes is removing that 26, which we see as updating an antiquated model of regulating gas station use. That currently limits the non-gasoline sales of a related gasoline sales use to 3,000 square feet. It's notably missing in other districts that are similar but less intensive. And so we see this as a way to allow additional retail uses related to gasoline sales to co-locate with those and provide the additional flexibility for the modern gas station models. We see this as a stopgap measure, and we want to revisit this in future zoning, looking at electric and other alternative fuel sources for future zoning articles.
Very good, thank you. Is there any questions or comments from the board relative to these articles? As traditional practice, we generally have, I believe it's at least two meetings, open meetings for the public on this, for public comment. Generally, we have a recommendation just prior to town meeting. So I know we will be continuing this meeting, actually a hearing, for next month. But if there's no questions from the board, I'll open it up for the audience. Yes, Mr. Molina.
Jason Molina, 31 Worcester Avenue. Am I at liberty to talk about both of them or one at a time?
Yeah, please.
Start off with adult day health definition. I was surprised to see that it was by special permit for the town center district. Doesn't that run antithetical to what the TCD was all about and having multi-use perspectives?
Well, so multi-use would still be allowed, in terms of the uses. Any individual uses within a multi-tenant space still need to meet zoning. So an adult day health use would be able to locate similar to if there's additional uses on the site in a multi-tenant space.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you. And then in terms of the non-gasoline sales footage, is this restricting where there's gas stations and them having retail spaces, or is this it seems, as a town meeting member, it seems a little confusing. What is it actually restricting?
So it's actually, I think, de-restricting what we currently have. So for lack of a better term, one of the, what the current Cumberland Farms model is the gas station, where really the retail portion of that business is what is the major driving factor, and the gasoline sales is really just to attract business.
Right.
Our current zoning would not allow that, so you're limited to 3,000 square feet. This would now allow for co-location, so similar to car washes or other similar uses to a gas station. They would be able to co-locate on the same site and not be limited to 3,000 square feet.
Follow up?
Sure.
Does that mean that the Stop and Shop could add a gas component? Is this
so
is
no,
this
other way
adding
around. So
allowances?
yeah, it's accessory. So the accessory, specifically to the accessory uses, co-located with a gasoline services primary use.
So the gas station would be the primary use.
Okay.
They could get a secondary use for retail.
And they could
This
be bigger.
article would allow them to not be restricted to 3,000 square feet.
Gotcha.
It doesn't mean people with retail can have gas stations brought onto their property at their
Okay.
own. No, it's,
All right.
it's driven through the gas station.
If I can foresee that being a question at town meeting, saying,
That's all right. Mr. McGoldrick will be well
Thank you.
prepared for town meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Indoctrinated. Thank you.
Is there any other questions from the audience? Okay, that being said, I entertain a motion to continue this public hearing.
I move that we continue the public hearing on the zoning warrant articles for the annual town meeting to the April 6th meeting of the planning board at 7 PM.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next item of business, discuss and vote on a bond release for Oak Meadow Circle. Mr. McGoldrick?
Thank you. I actually have some follow-up on this. I did speak to engineering this afternoon. This will apply for both bond releases before the board tonight. There is still the provision for as-built that's required, as well as going to town meeting for the final vote. We typically do retain some portion of the bond for potential for need for snow plowing if it's needed, as well as for the as-built plans. So what I would request in both cases, if the board is happy to consider them, the work is substantially done, but I would request that it would be for a reduction rather than a full release of the funds and the amount to be
And that would be
provided by the
Is that
engineering
for
department.
both Oak Meadow and Cypress Ave?
Correct.
And Glendale?
Sorry, just two of them, Glendale and Oak Meadow.
Okay, yes, sir.
Oh.
The first two.
Updated. Well, my
You're using the
apologies.
old
I
ones
had
still.
a different
Yeah.
one. My apologies.
So Glendale and Oak Meadow.
Correct.
And engineering would be the one who drives the number.
Correct.
So a motion could be to allow for a bond reduction based on the recommendation from the engineering and planning department. Does that make sense?
Correct.
Does anybody have?
That said, my understanding is the work is substantially complete, and it's just to remain a certain portion, so.
Yeah. Any questions or comments relative to that? I think we can trust them to come up with a good number for that.
With that being said, then I would make a motion that we authorize a reduction in the bond for Oak Meadow Circle and Glendale Avenue with the ultimate amount to be determined by the planning department.
And
after
engineering.
reviewing planning and engineering after reviewing what amount they feel is necessary to hold back.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can I borrow yours? Because there's another thing on mine doesn't. Okay, and our last item of business is to discuss and vote to recommend Cypress Ave road acceptance at town annual meeting. Annual town meeting. Any thoughts or questions on?
Nope, so that is coming from the engineering department. It's a request to have this recommended work is substantially complete again, and the request is to have this forwarded and placed on the town meeting warrant for acceptance.
I have no questions or comments.
None.
Anybody else on the board have questions or comments? So we should vote, I guess the the motion would be to vote to recommend approval of the, at town meeting. Okay.
Yep. I would move that the board recommend at the next annual town meeting on the warrant that they consider the acceptance of Cypress Ave.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's
With
it.
that, as all I have on my sheet and Tim's sheet, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn tonight's meeting of the planning board.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.